Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 59. I'm talking with Matt Conway, who is a matte painter who's worked on movies like Avengers Age of Ultron, Avatar, and also Game of Thrones, and lots of other cool projects. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay and welcome to episode 59. I am chatting with a really close friend of mine, Matt Conway, and we go way back. This is really cool to chat with him. He is a matte painter. He does a lot of phenomenal work on everything from Avatar to Avengers to Game of Thrones, so many other projects I'm trying to think of. True Detective, actually cheating here and looking at his IMDb, but yeah, lots of really amazing projects, and has a really vast background as a matte painter, doing a lot of really phenomenal shots. And I thought it'd be really cool to chat with him about his background, a lot of his process, and a lot of his experiences, how he broke into the industry. And we actually did an episode about 2 months ago, so end of last year, and it was actually a really cool episode. And what happened was I had my Mac recording through my Blue Yeti mic, and we're shooting at my place in Santa Monica. And with the Macs, you got the little side magnetic power cable, which was connected, as in the magnet was connected, but the power actually wasn't connected completely. And I didn't realize till literally 5 seconds before the power went out and we lost the entire thing. And at that point, we're just like, okay, screw it. We got to take a break. And it's such a shame because the episode itself was probably one of the best ones we've ever done. It was so cool. And so we finally decided the day of the Super Bowl. So I'm rushing this episode out, but we finally decided to sit down and do another episode. Now, I will mention that opposed to the original time we did it, I decided this time around to kind of dive into a lot of different stuff. Probably the first 45 minutes is us kind of just shooting the shit. And, for me, I found it to be really funny, got a lot of laughs out of it. For you, it may be interesting, or maybe, you just want to dive right into his background and everything else. And if that's the case, then skip ahead a little bit. But, I just figured it was a lot of fun doing this episode. And I'd love to do another one with him where we just, focus entirely on his techniques and his process and a lot of ways that he's been able to, really shoot his career up to the top. So I'm pretty sure we will do another one, probably at the beach with a couple of beers and a bit more chill. But still, I really like this episode. It went for quite a while. It was about, hour and a half, 2 hours, but really fun to do. So I hope you enjoy it. The other thing I want to mention is just from the minor editing I've done, I'm like, wow, we really swear a lot in this episode. So if you're a little bit shy or anything like that, then maybe it's not for you. But if you don't mind a few F-bombs and things like that, then enjoy. All right, so let's dive in. But
I am curious to see this Zoolander too. From everything I've seen, looks pretty funny. Unless these are the funniest parts of the movie that they're showing in the trailer.
Could be.
Yeah, which it could possibly be.
Actually, I remember reading The Martian, and I know buying the book The Martian, and I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I wanted to read it, and then I didn't know they were making a movie, and I'm sitting in the trailer, and I knew nothing about The Martian, and that's why I wanted to read it. And then the trailer came on, and I'm just like trying not to just like look like an idiot, like that. So I'm just casually like, please don't reveal too much. And after that, I'm like, well, not reading my book because
you kind of know. Yeah, I know. I did the exact same thing, actually. I started reading the book. Well, I knew of it because I'm a big Ridley Scott fan. So I knew he was doing the movie. And that piqued my interest. And then they had one of the early trailers came out. It was a teaser. Didn't have that much of the plot in the trailer. And then I started reading the book, which the book is actually... Did you ever start the book?
I didn't start. It's downstairs.
The book is really well written. It's like a...
Here he drops a lot more F-bombs in the book than he does in the movie.
He totally does. Like, I don't know why they didn't include that in the movie. It's really weird.
It's because it's PG. I read an article. I read an article about... Because like legally you can say fuck once. and that's it. Otherwise, it goes beyond that. So actually, we're going all over the place, but like, I remember watching Medicine Man, I think it was, with Sean Connery.
Yeah.
I was like 5. I didn't like it. I was bored. I'm like, go shoot someone. But
that's where they find the cure for cancer in the rainforest.
Because I fucking lost it. And then for 10 years, I was always baffled. Like, how could you say fuck when like back then you couldn't say shit? You know, even shit was like a big deal. And then suddenly, you know, he said fuck. And that always in the back of my mind was like, it's PG, and he's like saying F. But legally or rating wise, like you can say fuck once. So
just
like,
once.
So they had to be very strategic in how they did
so
it.
So he used it once.
So they were losing reception a few times where it's like it would cut out a few times, or they would he'd be typing fuck and they would cut to other people, or it would be outside.
I think
the window.
right at the beginning of the movie he says, "I'm fucked."
Yeah.
And that was it. That's all he could do. That's all he could do it.
So there were a few times where he said fuck, but what they'd do is they'd cut to outside of his vehicle where they couldn't hear it, and you just see him mouthing it, you know? And so I thought it was kind of funny just to kind of have to go to these extremes and for you to choose like, okay, which is the most crucial fuck to put in this fucking thing. Yeah.
That in like that whole thing where he is typing back to NASA. And they never show
they don't show
what he says, but he in the book I don't think he says fuck. He's like he makes the symbol for like boobs because he knows like the whole world's watching.
Right.
So he does like the the parentheses with the 2 periods, and that's what the joke was in the book. And I'm like, well, why didn't they show that? Would that be considered like showing tits in a PG movie? Like it's so weird. Yeah. Because they don't even in the movie they don't even refer to it ever. Like they kind of just show their reactions, but you never find out what it was that he did. Well, that's kind of weird.
That kind of fascinates me too, because like especially like spending a lot of time in Europe, I've kind of started to realize like how backwards everything is. Where over here, you cannot show a boob. Okay.
Yeah, it's
on a billboard in Europe, they'll have tits everywhere, and like that's normal anatomy. A statue is totally cool.
Yeah.
But you don't want to offend anyone over in the States with like showing a nipple. And that's the thing too, is it comes down to it's the nipple. So therefore, like women can walk down the street with little pasties, totally okay.
Yeah.
But you show a nipple, it is over. And it just blows my mind because in Europe, completely okay, because why wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
And over there, violence is not something that, censorship comes down to violence.
Yes.
Over here, you can watch like a G-rated movie, like a cartoon, people getting their heads cut off, they'll show footage of people being killed. It's
maybe not G, but PG for sure, yeah.
It is so acceptable now to do that. And even to the point where, more for shock value and for a good reason, but like Easter, Christmas with drunk driving, you try and do the shock factor of it all. And even Super Bowl today, they show a domestic violence commercial, and it doesn't show anything, but, it's all, there's that, and like I get that, but like for the most part, no one... It's almost encouraged. Like, let's show violence in every single way possible. Completely okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's backwards.
It totally is.
You get people to grow up like we were talking about at dinner the other night. About like kids, imitating movies when they're growing up, and I used to do it all the time. Like even be like Beverly Hills Cop and jump off my wardrobe onto a bed that's 6 or 7 feet below. Not that has anything to do with Beverly Hills Cop, but land on your neck and injure yourself, or beat up a friend, or just stupid shit that you just get excited because you see it in movies and you think that's okay. Everyone grows up knowing about guns and but that's the thing is like, and you see people get so strategic with, let's say, a PG or G-rated film or TV where side boob, totally okay. But people are so strategic about like even lighting and everything that you spend so much time to make sure that
sexual positions in movies. That's the other thing. Okay, so there's a really, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. There's a really good, maybe it was on Netflix, but maybe I just saw it somewhere else. A documentary on the MPAA and how it was formed.
I want to watch that because I'm
and
obsessed
like
with
what
censorship.
what they kind of, and it's just this small group of people that decided all this stuff, and it makes no sense at all, like none at all. And they, back in the day, they decided, this is the amount of fucks you can say, and then if it goes beyond this, it's now a rated R movie. And if you show a chick, if you show people having sex, but it's anything other than missionary, then it's automatically an X-rated film and all this stuff.
So fascinating.
Yeah, so like all of that stuff, full frontal for man, automatic X.
Yet now that's like the big new taboo. It's just like, okay, cock everywhere, and that's now the cool thing. It's it's kind of funny how people are going to explore these other areas now. But
but I mean, like the violence in movies is so crazy, and that's all okay. Yeah. But you can't say fuck while you do it. or you can't show a boob.
When I'm 6, I used to grow up like watching people's heads get cut off and everything else, and it's completely cool, you know.
Yeah. Well, I also read a while ago that sort of violence, because in movies they show a lot of violence, and it's this revenge type violence. And people are actually turned off by violence in movies that is, criminal,
right?
Where it's being perpetrated on an innocent person. Like it is repulsive, and people they do react to it in that way. But when it is a revenge type situation, they're like, yeah,
it's got to be as brutal as possible.
And people get riled up, and that kind of in that way, those people are rooting for the violence, to happen, which is kind of freaky when you think about that, and there's a lot of that in movies. Like there's a whole genre of revenge films,
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty. There's so many. I mean, even I didn't really like Payback with Mel Gibson, but that movie is like literally from the very
Give me back my son!
No.
Wait, is that not it?
That's Ransom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
also, another revenge movie.
Yeah, but,
with one of the best lines of all time.
That's the thing too. Is like I completely get why people are not digging Mel Gibson, but he is a freaking awesome actor.
He is directing another movie in your home country right now.
I think he's slowly starting to like redeem himself a bit. Finally,
I think Hollywood's like, well, you're never going to be in front of the camera again, you can direct something and we'll bankroll that because your movies make money.
Oh man, there was something I was thinking. I've got a few things I wanted to mention. I'm trying to keep in my head, but like there was, I was thinking about how like the recent stuff with Tarantino, how people are boycotting his movies because of the fact that he's protesting against the police.
Yes.
And the thing is that like I kind of figure that won't hold very long because it's not like he's in front of the camera, and I think that you can despise someone like Bieber or Wahlberg or someone because they're in front of the camera and you're looking at them, but when it's someone who's making the movie, you instantly forget that, and you're looking at Tarantino and Channing Tatum, and hopefully I don't give that away that he's in the movie.
Channing Tatum is in the movie very briefly.
I was like, what the fuck?
I know, like why is he here again? Tarantino, that was bizarre that he did that. And I bet you the guys at Miramax were a little perturbed, because it was like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the movie came out. And they're like, you could have just done that a little bit late. I don't know. But Tarantino, and people attributed the movie not doing so well to that. But I just don't think that that's true. I think, just the movie itself is not a... You
had Star Wars and a bunch of other movies coming out right around the same time too. It's the holidays as well. And like, you don't see... Like I watched... I listened to an interview actually with one of his friends. I forget who it was. It might have been Rodriguez, but he was talking about, or it might have been Jackson, but it was talking about exactly what he's going through. And like, he's someone that never gets involved in that shit. And for once, he's like, you know what? I'm going to say something because I feel this passionate about it. And instantly, it's like, you're going to be divided between the people pro and not. And one of them is going to be like, get him. So everyone's going to have an opinion. And
if the movie would have done well, then no one would have said anything. But then the movie didn't do as well as they expected. So all these people came out and said, well, it was because he said those things about the cops. I just don't think that had anything to do with it at all.
It's a great film, but Tarantino movies too, you got to kind of like mentally be ready for it. That's why I haven't seen all his movies too often, because it's like you got to mentally prepare yourself for it, because it's all dialogue. It usually goes in a lot of really different directions. And I listened to an interview with him, and he was talking about his whole process, and it's just basically like to try and mindfuck the viewer, and you're going to trust in the journey, and it'll be worth it in the end. But it's not really a movie. It's more actually the way he writes is he writes it like a book, like a novel, and so it'll jump around and have more of a narrative to it. And so he always structured his movies like that rather than a regular screenplay. What you were talking about before about people like reacting negatively to violence and everything, like I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography, and he actually talked about that because he was like one of the first people to ever do like the one-liners, and he did that exactly for that reason, because you would kill someone really brutally, and most people would kind of go through a phase of shock, especially back in the 80s where it was, it was not, we don't have Hostel and all this shit now, and so you kill someone, and then they kind of like, there's this disconnect where for a while you got to kind of like get over that and then get back into the film. So like for him to say like stick around or whatever, and that would make someone laugh at it and be like, ha ha ha, I know.
Could I get a pillow for my friend? He's dead tired.
Commando is such a brilliant film. And I love the bad guys in Aussie, and that it's like Bennett. He gets killed with
the
a
guy
steam
wearing
pipe.
like the chainmail,
I know, right?
Tank top. Like, what is that?
And for him to do that, like you would kind of, it would alleviate that tension, and you could like laugh and then get right back to the movie. And that became like his thing, but it was actually like a pretty brilliant thing. It wasn't like it was in the script a lot of the times.
Oh, interesting.
Initially, it's like, no, we got to do this to make this kind of more fun.
Yeah.
So
he understood the psychology behind it.
I've probably mentioned him so many times in podcast episodes just because, like,
I love Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, like I was going to dinner one night with some friends, and I was sitting in the back seat. And I'm like, I think it's really depressing right now that two of my biggest idols, I think, is Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, and it has nothing to do with action movies. It's more to do with like
how they just built themselves up from nothing.
Their business career and like how they handled themselves. So I don't know. It's just kind of funny because like I would never. When you think about those two, especially, it's just like, oh yeah, those brain dead beefcake guys or whatever. It's like no, like both of those guys have done like phenomenal jobs.
Absolutely.
And it's always been those like pivotal career decisions they made that Rocky could have just sold a screenplay and that's it. But he's like, nope, I'm going to be in it. Yeah. And every step of the way, he's kind of had a lot of control over what he's doing. Yeah. And that's why with the Expendable films, the reason he's going after more B-grade actors is because he wanted to give a second chance to a lot of people. That he got a second chance, and because of that, he got to kind of get back on top. So that's fine. People have phones, man.
Dude, sorry about that. Yeah, there's actually another great documentary on Netflix about the making of the first Expendables. That if you haven't seen it, it's really fascinating.
I've been obsessed with that before it came out for a lot of things. Even the fact that like he went from at 62 back into like
What's fascinating to me about that was he was so into the writing of that movie. Where if you watch that movie, just take it as face value, it's just ridiculous. Everything about it is ridiculous. It's like almost a spoof of 80s action films.
I might have watched it because I watched something where he's going through the writing process and rewriting and going.
Oh man, he's like, I think he's in really Venice, he is writing. I mean, it's crazy. And at the end of that, he gets all beaten up. Physically, I mean, mentally, physically, everything, but at the end of the movie, he actually gets injured, and he's having to fight through that. I mean, it's really, it's amazing. You see him kind of giving everything of himself for this, and we all look at it and kind of are like, well, that's a goofy action movie, but he took it very seriously. What's that?
I'm just being I don't. For some reason, I glorify that film.
Well, and I think on the second one where he brought in Schwarzenegger, there's a great photo of both of them getting like surgery after the movie because they both got hurt. Yeah, and so they're both in the same they're on gurneys. Being rolled into the
kind of like the
operating room.
End of Rocky 1 or something.
Yeah, exactly. And but I work out at Gold's Gym, and every now and then I'll see Schwarzenegger in there. He goes in the mornings.
It's like people seeing him riding around Venice on his bicycle. It's like,
he loves bicycling. But it's strange to see a guy like an iconic guy who built himself up from nothing, and also Stallone. It was really I watched recently Creed. Have you seen Creed?
It's brilliant. I got so angry when I saw the trailer. But then I saw the film and I'm like, it's not Rocky, which is good. Yeah. But it's brilliant. It's a really good film.
Yeah, and Stallone is so good in it. Like, I mean, I'm so thrilled that he is nominated for,
He is?
He is.
Because Rambo 2 got nominated for an Oscar, which was crazy. Ridiculous.
Yeah, no, he's nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
It's great.
And
it's funny to see like Rocky being the supporting actor.
It's crazy.
But yeah, it's such a great film.
Yeah, he's really, really good in it. And I'm glad that they did that. They kind of rebooted the franchise essentially with a younger actor, but are still keeping Rocky as a character.
Yeah, well, that's the thing it is the franchise and it's not the franchise in a way. And that's the thing is like when he did, I can't believe we're talking about everything but VFX, but when he did the final Rocky Balboa, the reason he did that was partially he did Rambo and then Rocky, I think, and it was mainly for his kids, so that way they could be like, okay, you actually are a relevant actor instead of being like, oh, you did some like silly movies in the 80s. Yeah. But at the same time, like to end the story of each, and that's why it's John Rambo, Rocky Balboa, even though there's Rambo 5 is in development right now. Yes. Where he takes on the Mexican cartel. Oh. Yeah, but that's meant to be the final one.
There was this rumor that they were going to do like some weird alien story with Rambo.
Oh, no, yeah. Back in 2006.
It was going to be like a Predator type thing?
No, it was. So he takes on this genetically modified creature in the jungle, and he's brought in to hunt it down. And the funny thing is, like, this movie sounded like Predator. It's stupid. And the funny thing is that movie, someone loved it so much they decided, you know what, we're going to break away from the Rambo franchise. We're going to make it a standalone movie because it's so good.
Okay.
And so they ditched the whole Rambo thing, and they were going to just, throw.
So that's going to be made though.
That was 2006, and
okay.
you know how shit floats around. I mean, you look at the Italian Job, the Brazilian Job's been in development for 12 years. So,
God.
But that's the thing is like movies come and go, and like Bad Boys 4 is.
Oh God.
No, sorry, Bad Boys 3 is finally happening, and that's because right after doing Bad Boys 2, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith both wanted to do a 3, but Michael Bay at that point had gotten so big that no one could afford him. So, for a good 10 years, they'd been like, we want to do it, and he's like, nope. And finally, it's like, all right, we're going to get, forget who's directing it, but someone else.
Martin Lawrence on his hands and knees, thanking God. Thank you.
This is all I get.
Oh, God. Jeez.
But yeah, and so with Stallone, like he did. He's doing Rocky V right now, but he's basically tying up those stories, and that's why Creed. It's like, why are you bringing something back? But he's not. It's it's a spin-off. And that's why like you watch Rocky Balboa. He's a big dude, but he's beefy, and then you watch he was probably like 58 or something when he did that, or 59. Expendables though is pictures of him, and obviously he's back on the steroids, and but like he's
human growth hormone something.
Well, he got busted in Melbourne in Australia. He's like going through the airport. That was the first big name.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, and he got busted for steroids, and that's like you watch Bigger, Faster, Stronger. That's like a really amazing documentary.
Yeah, I've seen it.
He just released a new. The same guy released a new one the other day.
Okay,
might have been the other day, but recently, and that's on prescription drugs. So I got it bookmarked. I haven't watched it yet.
Okay, but on Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
I assume it's on there. I saw it on Amazon Instant Video. I'm like, all right, because like
one of those.
I'm actually at the point now where I'm like, I want to watch TV. I'm like, fuck TV. There's nothing on there. I've watched it all. So I'm just waiting for some cool shit to come back out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that documentary was really cool, and even like Arnie was like, I don't do steroids, and then later on it's like, oh yeah, you got to do what you can to compete.
Well, he kind of admitted it a while ago. Like, yeah, we all did it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like back in the 70s, those guys down in Venice Beach, they were extremely gifted genetically in the first place. Like they were big. They had, just the type of body, but they used a small amount of steroids compared to what these guys use today. Like what they use today is like a cocktail of different steroids plus human growth hormone plus all this other stuff. It's insane what they're putting in their bodies. Schwarzenegger and those guys used one type of steroids, not that much, and they would go in cycles. So they would only use it for a certain amount of time.
Stallone was talking in his interview about it. It's like during Rocky IV, he's like drinking 27 cups of coffee a day, and just
Jesus,
and the thing is,
that's more than me.
Except on this project and that one, except on Avatar. But it's true. It's so true. And that's the thing is, you talk a lot of bodybuilders now, and it's like some people who are like professional bodybuilders in the sense that they don't compete, but so I guess not professional, but they're models and do all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But like they don't compete because they're a natty and they're not going to go and compete with others because like why bother? And most people you talk to about that subject, and I'm not a bodybuilder, but obviously, but like you talk to them about the subject, and it's like I wish they would divide it up. You have the natty or the people who do drugs, and then you have everyone else who's like, all right, I'm going to do this. There's actually a guy named Boston something. I forget his name now, but like Nadell and I we go through phases where we get obsessed with this stuff, and I forget his name, Boston Joe or something, and he revealed like he went from like this 19-year-old kid who's like a bit beefy, like not ripped, not that big, and then he published his stack, and over a year, like his stack that he used over a year, which you look at him and he's fucking like not normal. He's like not even V shaped. He's like something else, and he's just like not normal.
He's something else.
Yeah, his shoulder span is just like grown. Like everything about him is just like gigantic. And he does not look human. And the thing is, like he actually published that online, and a lot of his videos got taken off of YouTube because of that. And you can still track it all of it down, but like. But yeah, that's the thing is, he did a few interviews after that, and it's one of those things that like, someone can follow a stack, but if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, like, if you want to get into bodybuilding, you end up having to go through these other phases of like learning nutrition and learning how to fucking balance this stuff, because you start doing steroids, like you do something like that, like, oh, here's the cocktail to get big, go do that, and you're dead a day later. You gotta know like how to taper on and taper off, and also just how to combine it all and not get totally fucked up from starting too quick.
Yeah, those guys back in the day, I think they use it for a certain part of the year, and then they would get off of it because they knew, I think back then, like it's not something that you do all the time.
Yeah.
It's not healthy in the long run.
Well, it's just like lifting and stuff anyway. You have your competition part of the year, and that's where you
they would
lean
cycle
down.
in. I think they would use it, during their hard training, and then they would taper off probably right before the event, or maybe a couple weeks before.
It makes sense too, because you probably want to do more. Well, I won't say excessive amounts of cardio, but you want to cut your body fat down towards the end. And even with cardio, though, you want to limit that to a degree, because otherwise you're going to start destroying muscle. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of fascinating just kind of watching. Like, I've only been to Gold's once, and
it's a scene.
Like, man, I that was cool. It was actually, I joked because Nadell and I went, and that was like the one day I went with him to the gym, and I'm about to get back into that with him.
Does he go to Gold's?
I think he goes to Equinox now, because we were talking about it last night, because we were talking about Bieber, and he's like, oh yeah, like I've seen Bieber a few times like at the gym, and I'm like, he's at Gold's, like, really? It's like a toothpick. He's like, no, this is at Equinox, and I'm like, yes, that makes so much sense. Like, fucking,
that's better.
Like, because again, I am recording, like, Equinox is basically like the Beverly Hills of gyms. It's you go there, you can pay as much as like $450 a month, and then you get the laundry service, you get everything else. So they'll go in your locker.
It's like a
and
spa.
It is. It's and like, at least for a few of my friends who are more into the bodybuilding stuff, like they don't go there because it's like
you get one rack in there, for instance.
Whereas like you go Gold somewhere like that, and it's just like this run-down warehouse kind of setup, but like it's part of it. I think is there's no air conditioning there. It's just outdoor. Wind coming in, and the smell of sweat everywhere, and it's more like, okay,
the smell of
Arnie's
30-year-old
DNA
sweat
and is on the ground from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But even with Bigger, Faster, Stronger, they were filming when he went for governor, and like he wanted to redo his image, and they came in and tore down like all of his posters and everything else.
Yeah, that's
I think
right.
a few are back up there now, though, right?
Yes, like so they play like Pumping Iron on a loop. They have like this massive. They have like 4 TVs that are next to each other that create one big TV, and they just basically play. Well, they do Pumping Iron, and then they have this like terrible Mr. Olympia from like 1986, and it's so 80s. It's amazing.
It's great,
and I think that's why they play it. It's just ridiculous. And they do those on a loop. So every time I go in there around the same time every day, and it's about the same spot in Pumping Iron that it is it's Lou Ferrigno working out in Brooklyn, in this, basement, in this dark basement. And then they do.
So it's Mr. T basically, in Rocky III.
Yeah. He's literally screaming Arnold's name as he's doing like military presses. It's awesome. I don't know if he did it for the show or what. I think they probably asked him to do that. They wanted to create this rivalry in the documentary.
Tried to buy that thing because he wanted to like hide it, get rid of it.
Yeah, because he's an asshole in it, basically. And he basically says, he tried to retroactively go back and say like, well, I had to play the villain because originally they wanted Louis to be like the villain and Arnold to be like the people that everyone rooted for. And when they started videoing it, Louis was such a
nice dude.
Yeah, a very nice guy, and he was kind of had this overbearing father.
Yeah,
and he was the sympathetic guy in the show, and Arnold was the confident, already won this many years and on top of the world. And so they halfway through, shooting, they were like, we gotta, And so Arnold says that they requested that he kind of ramp up his personality. So he was sort of like that, but then he like really took it to another level.
I'm sure it was more the other way around. It's like, no,
right.
I'm going to ramp up my personality.
Well, and then there's a bunch of people that came out and said, no, that is what he was like, But
that's the thing. He's the master of like, competitiveness. Like he fucks with people for a living. He still does. Even as governor, he'd try and intimidate people like any chance he could. But that's part of his personality. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think he's a bad dude, but he definitely is a competitive person, And so you do what you can to win.
Well, I think he says at some point in that movie, in the documentary, or it might have been in there because it's a documentary about Pumping Iron, which is awesome.
That's cool.
And he said like, I already have won before we even get on that stage because I will convince everybody else that they won't win.
Yep.
Essentially, I'll sow seeds of doubt in them, and that'll be it. you know, and that's, I think it is kind of a sociopathic kind of thing when you think about it, because he enters every probably relationship or when we're sitting down.
Like he's mentoring that kid and he's like, hey, you look really sick. Like, are you you okay? And he's like, what? Like, no, I'm... The kid's dad is with them and everything. They're thanking Arnie for like hanging out with him. And it's just like, he's totally taking advantage of the situation.
You're not listening to your dad, are you? Like, no, you shouldn't be doing that.
Your mom's spending a lot of time with the mailman. Like, it's pretty amazing. But I don't know, like, more power to him, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. So maybe we should talk about something VFX related. No, like, I find it hilarious that we did this episode. I keep checking the power cable, by the way. We're sitting here probably 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Like and that was, to me, probably like the best episode ever. It was fucking awesome. I loved it all. It was just like, we were just totally getting into so much cool shit. Yeah. And then I think I noticed just before it happened, I looked over and saw the cable, because you got the Mac with the magnet cable, and it was connected, but it wasn't connected. Yes. And it's like my buddy John Brennick, he was describing last night, like Santa Monica people and OC people, like Orange County people. And he's like, there's Santa Monica people and then there's OC people. It's just like not quite the same thing. But so with this, I looked over and noticed, like, wait a minute, that cable is stuck on there, is not powered on though. And then laptop shut down, lost the whole fucking thing. But I think at that point we're both just like, fuck it, I'm not gonna do this ever again. Like it's just like, why bother? And
we had a couple beers.
Yeah,
we were done. We were done that day for sure.
I did. I spent like a fortune in buying a lot of like mobile equipment, so that way I figured like, okay, next time around we can go down the beach or something, have some beers, and look weird in front of everyone with microphones. But so I haven't done that yet. But like,
no, we're right back where we started.
But this is at least my backup, is like my second setup here. Yeah. But I've got it all in like a nice little Amazon pouch that I can like take out to the beach or something and shoot the shit.
Is that a plug for Amazon that you just did?
Oh yeah, totally. It's like I'll put the affiliate link on mine. Okay.
This website you should check out called Amazon.
I'm loving Amazon right now. Like, I got the Amazon Echo over there. So just make sure I shouldn't activate. But yeah, now you can call an Uber and shit on there, which is great. So you can just like yell it out as I'm frantically running around the room like it was yesterday.
My Prime account, I am, God, I'm so happy I did that.
Yeah. I've been asked to like move to Canada a few times recently, and I actually had this conversation. I was with Chris Harvey. He was here for the VES Awards for Chappie, because he was on the client side, right? So he was working with Neil Blomkamp. And so we had breakfast. Like, I've worked with Chris all over the world, like I think 3 or 4 countries now. And we go way back, and like, I was talking about if I moved to Vancouver, and I'm like, I don't know if I could, because like Amazon Prime, like they have it, but it's not the same thing. And
oh wow, definitely not 2 days.
Well, yeah, exactly. So on that dog sled that they have, I'm kidding. I love all the misconceptions about people's countries.
The dog sled.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, so I was just thinking, like, we should dive into stuff. Like, this is stuff we've talked about before, which is painful. But like, I guess if you wanted to just get started, I mean, like, who the hell are you and what do you do?
Okay.
Well, I mean, you've worked on a lot of movies, and I was talking about you to John Brennick, because like he's a buddy of mine, and I always hang out with him, and he's a VFX soup as well as like a senior compositor over at DD, and he's been there for over a decade. And I'm just surprised the two of you have never met. Yeah. So I was trying to remember yesterday what the hell you've worked on, because visually, like on the spot, I'm just like, okay, it's like Avatar, and he's done that Scorsese film. I can't remember the
Shutter Island.
Yeah. But that's exactly I remember now. But usually it's like that one with DiCaprio, and they're on an island, and and you've done like Game of Thrones, like a lot of shit. But if you want to roll through some of that stuff, and
sure,
what do you say when you're at the bar? Hey, you like Game of Thrones? No. What about Twilight?
Yeah. Thankfully, no, I did not work on Twilight.
I thought about it.
Yeah. I was not impressed by the visuals in that movie.
I actually bought a T-shirt that said Team Edward, just because it was before the third one came out, and I thought about working on the third one just as a conversation piece. I was single, and you go to like a lot of douchey bars.
That's great.
I thought Team Edward would be great. The same reason I have a New Zealand shirt, because a lot of like Aussies would come up and be like, "You're a fucking wanker," It's like Team Edward was like, "No, Jacob."
Yeah. I mean, I usually tell people, it depends on where I am. If I'm in Los Angeles, I can rattle off some more obscure stuff. If I'm traveling, I'll say like the big movies I've worked on. I worked on Avatar. I worked on the Avengers. I was joking that I only work on billion dollar movies at some point, because I did work on those like really close to each other. I've worked on some, Battleship. Most recently though, it's been Game of Thrones, Black Sails, which are, I think, two really good looking television shows. Premium shows here in the States, and then shown, I guess, just on regular channels overseas. But yeah, so those are the big ones that I've been working on recently at Rodeo, which is, it's been great. Black Sails is just an awesome experience because
that's the Michael Bay's producing that, right?
Yeah. And just the visual effects supervisors here in LA. So he comes over to the shop a lot, and we'll sit down, and it's really kind of old school in the way that we can really go over a shot, figure out the best way to accomplish it. And he's open to suggestions, and it really doesn't matter to him how we do it or how we get there. He just cares about the end result, which is, you would think that that's what a lot of people would be like, but it's getting more and more so where the client will actually tell you how to do something. I've seen that recently in a few things that we've done. But yeah, so I mean, it was a great, we did some stuff where we would go shoot ourselves running around in a backyard and get costumes and run around in front of a green screen and then composite ourselves back in. I personally wasn't involved with that part of it, but we talked about like how are we going
you with like a bed sheet.
Well, that was my problem. I was way too clean cut for the whole thing. Like we had to find like some people with like long beards and long hair, and
to the last week of production.
Yeah, like I was like, I can grow it out. I can grow out my beard. And
I'm such a man. I just do this.
Yeah, we needed like some. We needed like some Africans, because I guess in the Black Sails they needed some guys, and so we, but we talked about that. At least we knew we were going to have to add some more people, and we couldn't afford digital doubles. We couldn't afford like completely CG characters. So what did we do? We went out and just shot it, and it was actually in Deep Ferran's backyard that they did it. Deep Ferran is the art director, matte painting supervisor at the Rodeo Effects office in Venice, and my boss. So yeah, we took care of episode, like 4 and 10 of the season that's coming up for Black Sails. It's like just started on Starz Network here.
Should have had some cameos from like local Venice people, like the dude with the double electric
guitar on the rollerblades. Yeah, like just in the background in the jungle, you see a guy skating around playing guitar.
I've done actually a few shoots in here because I got like not 20 foot, it's like 15. Actually, it's maybe 20 feet ceilings. So like
some high ceilings.
Because I've got like all my gear. This is atrocious right now because like I need to move out of here because I had a cleaner in here the other day.
Oh my god!
And, I'm just like, don't go anywhere near there because that's basically my warehouse. It's just
look
like
at that
camera gear and
there's floodlights just in the middle of the room.
Oh yeah. Well, that was actually for painting, not for me, but like just because someone's like, oh, I can only paint natural sunlight. I'm like, well, 1,000 watts.
Pretty good.
is sunlight.
So yeah.
Paint at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, downstairs I've got like a couple of closets of just like nothing but camera gear and lighting gear. So I can set up like a 20 foot by 20 foot almost green screen. I've got 2 sets of those floodlights actually, because then you can simulate sunlight, and so like for daylight shots, things like that. So I haven't done it in more recent years, but I used to do a lot of shoots up here. You just move the couches out of the way, move the tables, and you got a big area and you can go really high. So
you do, you can,
Yeah, and the thing is, no one has any fucking idea because like you see it on screen, it's like, oh yeah, like that was professional. It's like
I buy that
living room,
Yeah.
But that's cool, and
I mean, just little things like we knew that he has a lot of like he's got basically like a canopy from trees in his backyard. So
that's great.
We looked at the footage. We're like, look, this is all like in a jungle. I mean, they're mostly covered in shadow and shade, and so we knew that it would work. And we had, I think, 2 guys in costume, and we just would have them do different things, and we would replicate them because it was supposed to be 2 sets of 2 armies essentially.
That's cool,
and it worked.
It's kind of neat. I mean, I love the fact that you can, in a way, it's kind of going back to that. You can kind of just shoot things really really cheap and dirty and get it to work, you know. And, yeah, that kind of works out really well because, you know, for a while there, it's like, you know, if you want to do anything, you got to do it on the expensive scale. And these days it's like, no, you know, if you know what you're doing, then you can, you know, make those, you know, you do a few tests and you're like, all right, this works. Just do it on a bigger scale. It's like Mythbusters. You start out small and then you go big.
Yeah.
You're going through a Mythbusters phase right now. It's actually the final season. Because, I've watched it, but I've never, like...
The moon one is awesome.
Oh, I think I saw that years ago.
Oh, it's really cool. Where they basically, like,
NASA
debunk...
even was like, please go ahead and
yeah,
try
they debunk all these, like, you know, people that say we never went, you know? It's like, great.
They're the same people who are like, 9/11 was photoshopped, you know? Like,
yes.
Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yes.
Yeah. But, yeah, it's only been like the last couple of days. I'm like, I need to watch something. I'm like, Mythbusters. Oh, it's still around.
They're very entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this morning, I was like in bed, like as you texted me, I'm like, okay, I better get up, you know. And but I was just like watching some Mythbusters, and I was googling like, where the other people go, because it's back to like Jamie and the other dude. So
okay.
Yeah, but like I guess like the last 2 or 3 seasons, they kind of negotiated their way out of a job. So
was that right?
Yeah. So you know, some kind of like contract differences they had, so they're not anymore. But it's the final season now anyway, so it's gonna wrap up. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's a pretty cool show though, and like they're rocking the phantoms these days. So they're getting, I think one of the shots they did was 17,000 or 27,000 frames a second.
Wow.
Which like I don't know what kind of hard drive you have to be able to store frames, like, you know,
raw frames.
Yeah. Well, I doubt they'd shoot raw for a start. I mean, that's actually a good point. Yeah. Because I doubt they're shooting like 4K or 6K. And I mean, if it's a Phantom anyway, it's 6. But yeah, it's pretty impressive. Like I've got it's on my table, the Blackmagic Ursa Mini 4K. I'm pissed because the 4.6 just came out, and I should have waited a couple more months. But
I think that's what we shot like in the backyard. It was just a Blackmagic. Yeah.
Yeah, you got the small ones like the Cinema and
Deke has a really tiny one.
Yeah, that'd be the Cinema, and the Pocket Cinema.
2K. This
one, you know, I was talking about like a shoot coming up. We're going to use the Dragon 6K like red.
Wow.
But we're also going to use this because like that is a film camera, and you know, so it's not like, you know, because I think on Mythbusters they've been starting to use Blackmagic cameras, but they're more like the Cinema and the Pocket. You know, it's more like $1,000 for a camera, and it's better than using a Hero, you know, like a GoPro. So, you know, but yeah, these ones are like cinema grade, but you know, you can go up to the Epic, and I was going to buy a Raven, sorry. So like, you know, with the bare minimal that you're going to work, like the brain, the lens, and everything else, then that's like 10 grand right there. And I feel like it's kind of like my theory in Santa Monica. You're paying an extra $1 million for the zip code, so it's like you live in a $200,000 house, but you're paying an extra $1 million just to so I feel like with Reds are amazing, and their whole color theory is amazing as well. But you are, in my opinion, paying for the full letters on the side. You know. Yeah. So yeah,
absolutely.
Like, cameras get expensive. Like I've seen lenses that are $100,000. You know.
That's weird. We were just having this conversation because Deke was looking at getting a slider. You know, and he went on this website, and this company does all these camera accessories. I'm like, you could spend a fortune on just camera accessories. I mean, you can go crazy. You know, the body of the camera is going to be $1,000, and you'll spend $20,000 on accessories for that camera. It's so insane.
Rule of thumb is to get at least get a lens for the same price as you paid for your camera.
Wow.
So
yeah,
and I'm doing a talk soon. I wanted to kind of point out the people that like you shouldn't be limited by like what you have, thinking like, oh, I can't do X, Y, Z.
Right.
So like I was talking about how it's important to learn integrating CG and live action together, and you know, so because like doing, let's say, effects on black, it instantly says, okay, you're not working in production right now, but if you're able to show like finished shots, it means like, okay, you can see a shot through to the end, like you understand the whole process, great. And it makes, in my opinion, like I'm going to hire someone doing that than, you know, the other thing, just because I know I can sit them down and get them working. So like I want to go out and shoot a bunch of stuff on the iPhone just to prove, and this is an iPhone 6, not 6S, so like 2K, like 1080p, but I want to just kind of prove that you can just go out and shoot a bunch of stuff on the iPhone. And I haven't checked my email the last 2 days yet, but like I had camera trackers like, you know, taking a few of these shots and tracking my stuff. But like one thing I instantly learned is like iPhone on your screen looks great, but like iPhone in low level light, you know, the sensor must be like pretty basic. Daylight, I think it'll be okay. Yeah. As long as the white balance is, you know, pretty good. Like, but like in garages or nighttime, like there's like and also the codec, because I noticed when I played it full screen on a TV, there's these giant squares everywhere because like the compression on the because it stores as QuickTime. Yeah, so
I've never seen iPhone footage on a TV.
Well, that's it. I've kind of like debunked my whole theory.
Yeah,
I'm like, maybe I should change.
Wait a minute. There was that movie that was done in an iPhone.
Avengers did a one shot in the at least one shot on that movie. And there's been movies since then that have shot with iPhone, but again, it's controlled environment. You're
getting the exposure right.
You do the white balance, and okay, like let's lower all the lights in the shot. And make sure that because you can't control much on your iPhone.
It's auto exposing too, right? Or can you turn that off?
I need to look. I'm sure you can turn it off. I was noticing that too because I shot some stuff in my garage and it was the middle of the day and Centinela is a busy street, so there's cars coming by. So like occasionally it'll block the light for like a second. So there's flashes, but you can fix all that in post.
Fix
just like degraining, Photoshop. But yeah, so like. There's definitely a lot I need to fix, like degraining and everything else. But I just sent this footage off and I'm like, look, here's why I'm sending you some shitty footage, first of all. But, also on top of that, like, is this even usable? So I got like an email yesterday. It was a freaking long one. So I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But, in theory, it'd be kind of cool just to be able to show off, like, here's what you can do on an iPhone. Yeah, so I like it. I like the idea, but whether or not it works, we'll see.
Yeah, but the point is, if you want to go out and do something, don't wait around for the next greatest piece of equipment. You should be just using what you can get your hands on.
Well, most people don't have access to 10, 20, 30 grand, cameras and shit. So like, you shouldn't need to. The iPhone 4S shoots 4K.
Yeah,
like you can go get a GoPro.
What? It does? 4K?
4S does. Sorry, 6S.
6S. Oh God, I didn't know that. Yeah. That's crazy.
And like
I just have the 6. I'm way behind.
I'll get the 6. I know, like
just lowly 2K. God, remember that was like amazing if you could shoot 2K.
Well, 2K
I
is
still
fine.
have my 7D. Like I was saying this the other. We were looking at all that camera equipment, and I'm like, I've had my 7D for I bought that thing in like 2010 or something. And I love it. Like I don't see the point of going, well, not yet, because like you were saying earlier, if you really want to make the jump, it's going to cost you so much more to do that. And do you really need that? I mean, for me, I don't.
I've got a few cameras here. Like I've got a lot of. I got a Nikon. I've also got a Sony, but I wanted to get a Canon camera just for shooting HDRI, just because I like the bracketing features on that better, or the auto bracketing better. So, but I didn't want to go and get a 7D because like they are expensive, And I just got a Rebel and it was like $300. And like, I got a lot of good gear for it. I could use a Sony or I could use a Nikon, but I didn't have any good luck with adapters trying to get over to the EF mounts. So I just figured like, why not just buy like for still images? And I'm sure someone's going to email me like, no, you're wrong, Alan. But from what I could see, the let's say the 5D or 7D, both of those were like, the Rebels were pretty similar in terms of that. It's more to do with videos where it really changes, and at least for what I need to do, that seemed to work fine. I mean, it's like $300 compared to $2,600. So
that's the thing. You can go jump up. Like I did think about going up to the 5D Mark II, and they haven't updated the 7D. I don't think since I bought mine.
If it works, it works.
Yeah, it totally does. Like, and at the time when I bought my 7D, it actually was better on video than the 5D. The 5D was great for stills. It's a full frame camera. Yeah, and 7D is a partial. It's a cheat. But at that time, the 7D could shoot 24 frames a second. The 5D only could shoot 30. And it just, the software, they had to update the software and everything for it. And then they came out with a newer version of the 5D Mark II. I think it's a Mark III now. I don't know. But I'm completely happy with my 7D. I know the camera. I know it inside and out. So yeah, and then to go up to a 4K camera now would just be ridiculously expensive. And for what? How much more are you getting?
You have a 4K TV, but most people don't. Like 1080p is still going to be a standard. And like, Like I was talking with a few TV guys recently. I forget which studio, but like we were talking about this because like as soon as you switch to 4K post, like for TV, I just don't know if that's going to work because you're either going to output everything at 1080p and then up-res it, or because like there's a mixture of both going on right now, but like it's going to get so expensive like to pixel fuck 4K stuff because when you double the resolution, you're really tripling the amount of work.
Yes.
And so the thing is like I shoot 4K. Right now I'm shooting a lot of like 60 frames a second 4K footage, but I crop it down afterwards and just means I've got a bit of reframing play if I want to. But even then, like I'm not going to do that too often. But you have the luxury if you need to be able to shift things around a little bit or do a bit of a digital pan, whatever. Yeah, so it just kind of gets a bit overkill. Like I don't see people going like 4K, 6K for regular day-to-day shit. If you're shooting a movie and you want to go IMAX, then go wild, go stereo and go 6K and make everyone cry when you've got to work on that shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when The Hobbit came out and they did 4K. What is it? 4K at
40 frames a second?
48 frames a second. I'm like, you just made everyone's lives miserable. Yep. Like everyone, you know. I don't know how much more work that is. You know, it's double the frames. It's double the output. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's double. You know, like you said, it was like it's really 3 times the amount of work.
Yep. Well,
and as far as rendering, it's doubling the work. You know, like rendered frames.
Well, Peter Jackson was the one always pushing that from the day one.
It looked terrible.
Yeah, it looks so floaty. It's kind of like when you watch I think it's 120 hertz TVs, especially in like Europe. You watch movies and they look so weird. Yeah, they have them over here too, but it's not as common.
It looks like a soap opera.
Yeah, it's just floaty, and like I was watching Flight, and I was in Helsinki, I think, and I was watching on TV, and I'm like, this movie looks terrible. And like I know I've seen Flight, and I fucking love the movie.
You worked on it.
On here, it's just like it looks so shitty.
You're destroying my movie.
It's just you kind of get detached from it all. And I think I mentioned this before, but like on The Hobbit, the first one I think or the second one, they were trying to deliver the final movie, and again Peter Jackson's pushing 48 frames a second, and literally the last week they weren't even close to finishing the 24 frames a second version. So I can say this because I'm not mentioning names, but they were just going to overflow everything, so like retime the shots to 24 frames a second.
Oh my god!
So that didn't happen. They miraculously went through a few thousand shots in a week. They just turned everything around like it was a miracle. But that is like to this day like the worst production to go through. Weather is just like fucking nightmare of a project, and they weren't going to be able to deliver on time. They were just going to have to like retime it all and nuke and be like, 48 frames a second when it's not rendered at that. And, so it just blew my mind that that's something that he's kind of standing behind, and then to have that kind of be the outcome would have been pretty sucky. But I've only seen the Hobbits on the VES screeners that we get sent. So like I've only seen like the DVD versions that they mail out. Yeah, so
I just saw I saw the last one in the theater. The first 2 I saw on a television.
The last one I think is the one that's worth it, because like Smog is just fucking phenomenal. And
that was the second one.
Actually, Smog. You're right. The third one I hated.
Smaug. The third one was terrible.
Yeah, like why did
it was terrible? Like I was so like I'm like, oh god, this is. I actually fell asleep in the movie. To be perfectly honest, like there was like a battle going on, and I fell asleep, and then I woke back up, and it was still going on, and like no one of any consequence had died, and I'm like, what was the point of that? Like I don't know how long I was asleep for, maybe 15, 20 minutes. I don't know, maybe 5. But I'm like, oh, and it's still almost sunset. It's been sunset for the last 45 minutes in this movie. Yep. And no matter where the camera's pointing, it's always pointed with backlit. It's all backlit, no matter what. And it just annoyed the shit out of me. Everything I'm going to go on a rant. Yep. But everything had this glow. They put this nuke look to it. It looked, and I don't know if they were trying to cover up, the work or what. It was just way too much. Yeah, way too many vignettes and glows, and it just looked. Bad to me, and I know people that worked on that movie, and I feel bad, and I've said it in front of them, and they're like, they know, and I took like a couple screen grabs, and there's this shot where this army is coming up over a hill, battling these like giants or something. I don't know the story that well. I fell asleep, but there were so many glows and stuff. Like it looked like a video game to me. That one shot like reminded me completely of like a cutscene in a game, and it's done better in games usually. Yeah, it's like I didn't know Digic did this movie or Blur or right. Yeah. What was that commercial that you worked on with the character? It's like an orc kind of guy. You did the what was it? It was like you did a bunch of ashes and stuff. Oh, like God of War? Yeah. Right. Like that commercial looked like better than anything. Well, it's live action, but we did a lot of that like on a studio set in North Hollywood. Like the first shot we did in Chatsworth on one of the hills out there, but for all the location stuff. But everything else in the second part of the commercial is all on set, mainly green screen, except for like some of the later ash shots we had, like an ash ground, which was pretty cool. Yeah. We were just talking about this at work the other day too. How the Lord of the Rings trilogy looks so much better than The Hobbit. Yep. And it's because the Lord of the Rings, they use a lot more practical stuff. They built sets. You know, they dressed guys up in makeup as orcs. They didn't just CG them all.
It's funny. Most of the Uruk-hai are just two dudes. They're twin brothers, and they're just fucking built like a truck. And they just use the same guys in like most of the shots. So foreground is always the same dude, two dudes in different makeup.
Yeah. Like in the miniatures in that original movie are awesome.
Yeah,
like they
Weta
are
Workshop
incredible.
Just reinvented, everything when it came to that. It's just like the kick butt. Like, it was really authentic. That's the thing is they didn't. Most of the time when they made anything, it wasn't like, okay, we're just going to paint it to look like metal. We're going to, they're actually legitimately making real swords, real.
They had a whole because I got the DVD sets of the original, and they have extensive like behind the scenes, making ofs. And they basically built all that stuff. I don't know. Like I was just disappointed that they went that route in The Hobbit. It was like they wanted to do it on the cheap almost. I don't know what it was.
I know like a few of my friends were producers on that movie. So like one of my friends was like the line producer for the whole shoot, Richard Barker. So he'd always tell me, because he worked on like Willow and all these like movies back in the day. So he is like old school. He's not around anymore, unfortunately. But like he was phenomenal. Like, he was telling me a lot of stories, and that's one thing that they didn't take into consideration, because it's such a big movie and they showed it back to back. So like it wasn't like you shoot one, it's like, okay, now we know what to do next time. So what they end up doing is they shot the entire movie, and then they're like, we didn't really pay attention to like where Mordor is and like where this is, and so they needed to go through the entire movie, like all the offline edits, and figure out for every single shot which direction the camera is facing. So that way they could then say, okay, in the background is Mordor, because you can always see where you are based on where you're looking. So they need to do it for every single shot in the film. Be like, okay, now we're looking this way, so it's like clear sky, or it's over there, it's all dark and gloomy, depending on like how far into the film and everything. And it's just like all these like little things that, because it was like a one shoot process, is going through it. Afterwards they're like, ooh, in hindsight, we should have done X, Y, Z. Yeah. And but I mean that's the thing, is like that movie kind of revolutionized things so drastically, and then you would expect doing Hobbit that things would change. Like with the first one, Fellowship, they barely showed Gollum because he wasn't developed yet. It wasn't until like midway through Two Towers they'd finally got him to a point where they can improve on him. And then you see Return of the King, like he is night and day better than two. It's they just kept upraising him and making him better. And my buddy Dave Clayton was the animation director.
They pushed the enhance button.
Yeah, exactly. Upres, sharpen. So one of my buddies was here for the Oscars a few years ago for the first Hobbit, and we were talking about that at dinner, and it's like, okay, how's Smaug? Is it? How's he going? And
Smaug.
They hadn't decided yet how many legs he was going to have yet, because again, like all the artwork from like Alan Lee and everything else like changes over time. It's like some people have one idea of how he looks and another, so like they were still trying to figure out even anatomy wise, like the bare basics of how he's going to look, let alone everything else. So it's definitely a process where you watch the first Hobbit, even though I saw it out of context because I fell asleep through the whole thing. So I'd watch a little bit, and then Gollum would be in it, and I watched a little bit more there eating dinner at the very beginning of the movie. Then I had it on a loop, asleep, so I just kept watching this whole thing.
It's hilarious,
total mindfuck. But they totally were trying to figure it all out on the fly. And so it's a process. So like the first one, they don't show Smaug at all. It's like I was at dinner the other night and my buddy was talking about Bolgan. Well, I said Bolgan, and he's like, it's Bolgan. And I'm like, okay, it's Norwegian, I get it, okay.
I keep making fun of it because I watch Half in the Bag. It's this show on YouTube through Red Letter Media, and they make fun of the Smaug name the entire review. So every time they say the name, it's like kind of a different pronunciation, and then they emphasize it. Yeah, they emphasize like the difference of the Smaug part. Yeah, it's pretty entertaining. But that was the best part of the entire Hobbit trilogy, like him. Yeah, and the scenes with him. I just wish there was more of that. And those were actually done really well. It looked good to me.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It's like when you watch The Dark Knight. It's like Batman. Who gives a fuck? Like, go back to the Joker. Like that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. I could have done a whole movie. Yeah, you're right. I could have spent the entire movie with Smaug, just in that pile of gold. Like that would have been good.
I'm expecting Scrooge McDuck to be like swimming through that shit.
What's that on Family Guy where they do this Scrooge McDuck thing and he dies and he like breaks his neck?
He's like, this is nothing like the country.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked 5 minutes of VFX out of all this,
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning. I like talking about this stuff because I guess everyone has like their origin story, but it's also kind of like, you can connect the dots with like some people with where they are and like where maybe they need to take their next step. Like I just did an episode yesterday with Jamie over at Bungie, and I pretty much just made the entire episode focused on how she got her first job because it was really fascinating because I rarely meet anyone who's like, I went to school, and then a month later I'm working with Microsoft's like biggest game company on the biggest IP in the world, and it's like, yeah, I applied somewhere and got the job, and it's like, wait, there wasn't I was starving on the street and I had a tin cup, and I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me it was going to be this hard? So I was kind of like, what did you do right? And it's pretty fascinating, kind of breaking that whole process down. So yeah, I mean, like, how did you start out? I mean, we've talked about this before, but like, did you just bust out like the finger paints back in the day? And it's like, I have arrived. I know what I'm going to do.
No, when I was a kid, I liked to draw. I thought I was going to be like a comic book artist because I really loved like Garfield back in the day. And then I thought, well, I want to do like Saturday morning cartoons. That's what I thought I was going to do. And then I took all that into school, and I was always drawing in school and getting in trouble for not paying attention and doing that. But I had some I did, I worked at the newspaper in high school doing comics for that. And I really thought like, okay, I'm going to go to art school, and that's what I wanted to do. And I looked at Cal Arts because that was, basically it was a Disney funded school initially. And like Tim Burton went there, and John Lasseter and all those guys.
Cal Arts is huge.
Yeah. And so I thought, and I just had kind of discovered it.
It's the MIT for art, basically.
Yeah. It really, and it was, back then, and this is like, 1990, I don't know how I found it really, because of course no internet or anything. I just did some research, and I knew that like someplace like that would be great. Then I looked at the cost, and it was so expensive. It was, I think back then, like $20,000 a year to go, and that was just the tuition.
Now it's like $40K. I've been researching how much schools are, and like everywhere standard's $40K a year.
Yeah,
it's fucking
crazy. And my family, I'm a second oldest of 5 kids. My dad was in the military. My mom didn't really work. She was like a stay-at-home mom. Alaska. Yeah, living in Juneau. And my dad told me, like, if you want to go to school, you're going to have to find a way to pay for it. And I knew, like, right then, my kind of heart sank when I saw the price, because I knew that I was probably not going to ever be able to go there.
Yep.
So then I just went I found a way to pay for school, but I went and got just a business degree. And during that time, I always had the thought in my mind that I was going to do something.
So let me just jump in there for a second. Yeah. So, like, where did you go to school for business?
So I went to UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Oh, wait, so Las Vegas?
Yeah.
So you moved from Juneau, Alaska to Nevada to Vegas and studied business.
Yes.
Opposed to doing art in California.
Yeah. And the reason why I did that was because at the time, Nevada and Alaska had a deal essentially with each other that you can go basically for in-state tuition. If you were a Nevada resident, you can go to Alaska and go for in-state tuition to go to school. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get out of Alaska. I knew that. And UNLV had a pretty good business school. And I kind of knew that in the back of my mind, I wanted to maybe own my own business one day. I didn't know what that would be.
Plus, they're so similar, like Juneau and Vegas.
Well, that was the thing too. When I was a kid, and a lot of my high school friends did the same thing. Like, went to the desert immediately. Like everyone wanted to get as far away from, green trees and, I mean, Juneau is a beautiful place, but, when you go to high school, all you want to do is maybe go to Arizona or go to, it sounds strange, but you want to get out of that entirely. Right. So, yeah. But, like my last 2 years, at UNLV, I took an internship, and it was really cool. It was at the film office in Vegas.
Can I cut off for 1 second to say, so before we get into your first gig doing that, what were some of the things that as an artist you learned from going to business school? How many years did you study business?
Well, it was a 4-year degree. Mm-hmm. So, but basically in the United States, you do about 2 years of just basically you're redoing like your high school shit over again. The last 2 are really the business part. Right. So, you get into accounting, you get into, how to look at a balance sheet, how to, and my emphasis was management. So a lot of my stuff was, running a business, overseeing employees, philosophy. A lot of it is philosophy too. since I was doing business, it's like, how do you treat people essentially? But you have to have that core, like I had to take statistics classes. I had to take accounting classes, which I hated it. I hated the number side of it.
Right.
But to be able to like read a balance sheet and all that stuff was important. So for me, like what I got out of the business thing was, I mean, I knew I had an aptitude for it. It was, a lot of that stuff wasn't very difficult. But that being said, like in the back of my mind, about a year left in my degree, I knew I wanted to go back to school, back to art school.
Right.
So I started like buying like, there was like Animation Magazine back then, and I would go buy it, and it was so funny because
an issue around here. I get it. I don't know why, but they send it to me for free. I never signed up for anything, and I get it.
Oh wow,
I get it every month.
Oh, that's great.
Like, thanks, I guess.
Yeah, and I just thought like I got a internship at the
3-month internship.
Yeah, at the Film Commission, Nevada State Film Commission. It was great. I mean, I was reading scripts, and it was cool, and we were deciding on like locations for films and stuff like that, which was fun. But I was dressing up in a suit every day, and I was sitting in a cubicle and making phone calls, and I knew that it wasn't for me, and I knew obviously that I wasn't just going to be able to get out of school and start a business or anything.
Was there, I just, before we leave that subject, was there anything that you, to this day, kind of took from at least that experience that you apply to what you're doing now? Like,
well, now that I have my own company, yeah, I mean, some of that stuff I use when I'm doing my accounting work, and stuff like that. But what I really took from it, like really in my heart of hearts, is that I didn't want to do that. And it sounds negative, but it's really not. I use it as like a motivational thing. I used it back then. I didn't know that at the time, but I knew that I didn't want to do that I didn't want to be the guy that, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what people want to do, but I just knew that it wasn't for me, that
you find what resonates with you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be the guy that wore a suit and went into a cubicle and was told what to do all day.
You want to go be an artist and work in a cubicle.
Hey, we don't have cubicles. No, I kind of do. I don't know.
The reason most people don't is not because of the floor plans, because it's a lot cheaper to make a bench,
right,
with a bunch of chairs lined up, and to give someone
one long
space.
bench.
Yeah,
squeeze them in. So I started getting like Animation Magazines, and like from there, I kind of was like, well, here's some, and they had ads in there for schools. And I started looking into that, and I was like, "Oh, well, these schools are."
Tell us about Full Sail. No, I'm kidding.
So these schools were a lot cheaper than what than Cal Arts.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these schools were popping up, and they were brand new. And I went and saw Toy Story in between my junior and senior year of school, and I thought, okay, this is probably like the way things are going. This is like the new thing, this 3D animation. So I kind of was fascinated by it, the idea of it, and even like as a kid wanting to do like Saturday morning cartoons, and I was always interested in animation. That piqued my interest because I was like, that's the future. If I can get maybe in on this now, start now, then I could be able to do something with this maybe. So I applied to the Art Institute of Phoenix when I was still in school. I remember having to tell my parents, so when I graduate, I'm going to go back into school.
Right. How old were you when you graduated business school?
How old was I? Gosh, 23, 24. Because I didn't go 4 years consecutively. Like, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I took like a year or two off in between there.
Most people do that. They're like, I'm going to Europe to find myself.
Yeah, and I just didn't know, and it was one of those things where, do I really want to invest this money in getting a degree, and I really don't know what I want to do yet, and so it was kind of, I was just trying to figure it out. So I was a little bit older when I went back into art school. I wasn't a young kid, but I didn't know shit. I didn't know shit when I went to school. I remember my first Photoshop class, I took a 3.5 inch floppy disk with me, or 4.5 inch, whatever the hell they were. And they,
you had 3.5, and then you had the 5 1/4.
Okay, not the big one. Yeah. The smaller one I brought in with me. And my first Photoshop teacher was like, what do you expect to do with that? And I was like, I'm going to save my project. And he's like, no, you're not. I literally knew nothing. I was so far behind as far as, knowing any. I mean, I learned Microsoft Office when I was in business school. I knew that in and out, but man, I was really just way behind everybody when I got to art school. So I had to just catch up.
Yep, that's cool. And what was it like for you? I mean, within your first, like, let's say month or two, where you're like, I've arrived, like, this is the missing link I needed? Or was it more like, okay, I'm learning what I already knew, but I'm at least on the right path? Or how do you feel?
I felt like, I looked around and there was kids that were a lot younger than I was, and they were very already. They were
whippersnappers.
Yeah, they were experienced with the software, and I wasn't, and I knew that I had to catch up. But I wasn't intimidated by it. I just knew that I had to work harder.
Yep.
And I did feel like I was on the path that I needed to be on. I did. Like I was like, I don't know anything, but I'm excited about it, and I'm trying to learn. And I did, I found a couple of guys. This was very, very important for me, is because it was a new school. You can, I know people have their opinions on those art institutes and all these other schools that are kind of, businesses.
Yep.
Meant to make money. But at that time, I think they were, the teachers there were doing the best that they could. They weren't that experienced, though, because really, it was so new, teaching like 3D, and not many people knew that much then.
Even now, I usually keep my mouth shut about this because everyone's got their opinions, and I don't want to talk negatively either. But the big thing is, and that's why I like let's say online training, because you're not paying $40K, you're more being selective about your training. You find the teachers that you trust rather than the school that you
right.
So that way you can find, because like everyone's got their own teaching style as well. But the big thing is that a lot of those people teaching have a day job. They're in the industry,
that's right,
doing the thing. Whereas in that way, like they could say, "Oh, today we're working on Star Wars 8, and we did this really cool thing. Let me show you what I discovered or invented or whatever." But typically with schools, it's more, and this is where I don't want to talk negatively, but I'll say like, it's most of the time it's not people who are in the industry. It's more we're in the industry, or and some people were never in the industry. So it really depends. But and it's not to talk negatively about those people because they're good at what they do. It's more to do with the fact that schools usually are not able to pay what you could be paid in the industry. Like you're on $50K a year instead of $150K a year or whatever. And that means that unfortunately you're not, those people, if they can work in the industry, are going to be making a lot of money. And if you do school, it's unfortunately it is like our industry where it's like eventually you hit that wall where it's like, I can't do the hours and all the BS that comes with work in the field. So doing teaching, is fun because you're helping others, and there's a lot of great experiences you get from it. But unfortunately, it also means you're not in the trenches every day doing it. So,
right.
I think there's benefits to both. But
there is that. You're absolutely right. I mean, you can get run down doing the day-to-day industry work. And teaching is like a nice break from that. But you're right. You're also like, you got to keep everything. You got to keep your skill set up. And so you need to be working also. So there's a balance of those two things.
Let me, sorry, I keep jumping in, but like John Brennick, actually, I keep mentioning him, but like, I remember he picked me up from the airport. I was flying back from New York, and there was this girl I was dating a long time ago. She was studying at NYU. And I remember getting in the car with him. He picked me up, and we were talking, and he's just like, does she know what you do for a living? And it wasn't like he was saying it like as if it's a cool thing. He's like, is she aware like that you work in visual effects? In other words, the hours and the bullshit and everything that comes with it. And, I kind of didn't really get like the way his tone about it. I was just like, what do you mean? Like, it's like, I've got to have a sit down and be like, just to let you know, I work in VFX, so, take a photo because you won't be seeing me much or whatever. And, but it is kind of true. I mean,
it is. Yeah. Like, I was just having this conversation with someone at work, and I dated this girl that worked in the industry, and we were talking, so did he. And we were lamenting the fact that, wow, back then you can say like, look, I'm not going to come home, or I'm not going to make it tonight. And they totally understand. Whereas, you date anybody else, and it is hard for them to get it, And I did joke earlier, like, because I'm working on Game of Thrones season 6, and we deliver at the end of April, like mid-May, probably something like that. And I just told my family and friends, like, I guess I'll see you in May. Because I just know that it's going to get pretty crazy. But that is kind of what you have to deal with, So yeah, there was one guy when I was going to school. He was working at Fox Animation Studios in Phoenix. So they had back in the day like this studio there, and this guy was working on Anastasia, which is this hand drawn back in the day, and he'd worked on something before that, but I'm not going to remember the name of it. They're really beautiful movies, like actually when you think about it. But at the time, everything was going like towards the Pixar thing, and that was kind of considered like hokey. even. Now like that 2D stuff has made like a little bit of a comeback, but back then it was like, oh, it's not cool anymore, but he was excellent. He probably was my best teacher there, because he was working and he was a excellent artist. Like his drawing, I did a light drawing class with him, and I was like, holy shit, this guy is awesome.
That's great.
I learned so much from him, and it was good for me because I needed a strong base, because I basically was kind of skipping over a lot of the things that I should have learned initially. Now they had courses that you took to get you ready to do like the technical stuff, but it's a 2-year program. It's very accelerated. Like, you're not going to learn like everything you need to know about composition, color theory, design, anatomy, like all this stuff that you need if you wanted to be like a 3D generalist, which is what I was going for.
So you were actually already at the point of targeting 3D?
Yeah, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to animate. I mean, that was my initial thing. I thought that like animation, in that using this software to do that sounded so interesting and cool to me.
Was that because of Toy Story?
Yeah, and plus because I wanted to be an animator, and I always thought it would be cool to make something in motion, do something. When I was a kid, I did like flip books and stuff like that. I loved the idea of that. Like, it's an illusion, it's a trick,
Yep.
And I mean, and that's kind of how, I guess, like why I ended up getting into matte painting later on, because again, it's just a magical trick. It's a sleight of hand. So I did that, graduated from that, and I know what I also did in school was I found a couple of guys that were really good, and I befriended them and asked them
on Facebook?
If they could. This was before Facebook. It was called the Facebook. I just found them, and like, because we would spend a lot of lab time there, and I would get there early and want to like get my stuff, because back then we didn't have network computers, so I had to like
the floppy disk actually came in handy.
It's like no network. Like we had rows of computers, and I would get there really early, and I would break up and I was doing like my senior thesis project, which was an animation, and I would just break it up into scenes. And put it on a zip drive. I don't know if you guys remember that shit, but
big blue expensive discs.
And I would break it up and then literally take it to each computer, to each scene, and run it. Because I couldn't send things over a network. We couldn't do distributed or network rendering. So I just found these guys and asked them, what do I need to do to get better? What did they do? And that to me was more important than probably anything I learned from my teachers at the time, because again, these guys, they knew the basics, but really what these students were doing was much more advanced than what the teachers were teaching. And so I instead just went to them, and they were cool. It wasn't like they were like, oh, you're not good enough.
These are my secrets, I'm not going to share.
Yeah, they were really open, and I realized, I'm like, I need to just put in the time and really start doing this stuff. And these two guys that ended up getting hired like right out of school, I forget where they went, but they were hired because they did their project as partners. Oh, cool. And it was awesome. Like what they did was incredible. And then they went and they got hired as a team to work at some animation studio or game studio back then. But that's when I learned, I'm like, okay, I remember I had a part-time job when I was going to art school, and I quit it.
Oh yeah.
And I just said,
what were you doing?
I was a barista.
You're the dealer at the casino?
I was a barista. And I realized that when I'm not in class, I need to just be always doing it. And it wasn't that long of a time. Like it was like maybe the last.
You need to immerse yourself in what you're learning.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I was totally motivated, and I would get up and, like I said, I remember getting up at 5 a.m. to go to the lab, because the lab, I think, opened at 6 a.m. or some crazy shit.
That's cool.
And because I knew if I didn't get there, I couldn't get that line of computers. And I was a jerk. I would like take up the whole like row, and like people would come in and I'd be like, sorry, I'm animating or I'm rendering. And it's back then it took forever. There was no GI, nothing. I was just it was basic scanline rendering.
That's me. Like most people work till midnight. I get up at 5 a.m. and go into work, and because the render farm's usually about finished then, and I can jump on and.
Well, I was there all day. I remember like towards the end, I would get in at 6 a.m. and I would work until they kicked me out, which was like at midnight or 1 o'clock or something. And because I was doing like in camera motion blur and stuff like that back when no one was doing it, but I was like, but it's gonna make it look so much better. It's gonna make it look real and blah blah blah. And I was really, so I sacrificed a lot of the like time save that I could have if I didn't do that, and just little things that I wanted to work on. So I did that. I graduated and moved to Seattle and started working. So pretty quickly.
Wow. So you went from Juneau to Vegas or Nevada to Seattle. And like, what were you doing in Seattle?
I was working for a company that.
And what year was this?
This was like
97,
around.
98?
This was around like 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
And they were a .com company that basically did medical animations for informed consent. So they would have these little units, these kiosks, and they basically would describe the procedure that people were going to do, and then they would actually sign this kiosk, like it's.
So where are they? They're in like a hospital.
They would have these kiosks in a hospital, and so before procedure, like whatever, when we did it,
weird.
Yeah. And back then, instead of like having a sit down and like just having a doctor describe,
I'm starting to picture like a vending machine where it's like, I'm gonna get the heart transplant.
I think
here.
like it was strange. Like it's this, it's funny now because like now it would just be all on a laptop, But back then they needed to have they built this like piece of hardware that showed this, and they would roll it in, and someone would be on a bed or gurney or whatever, and like they would watch the animation, and they'd be like, okay, I agree to
You're all
this.
drugged up anyway.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
And so. I mean, for me, I was so excited when I got that job because I was actually going to do something 3D, and I thought that was neat. It was like the first step.
Yeah. I got a friend who's like a multi-millionaire 10 years ago, and that was less common. And he started out just doing medical animation.
Yeah.
And started a studio to do what he enjoys, but was still making all the money on the medical software and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's make a killing doing that.
Yeah. It was good. It was a good first job. And then I moved into doing animation, or not animation, but like rendering and more architectural stuff for this company that did these online seat. They didn't sell it themselves. What they do is they sell they would build like a stadium, and then like for instance, they would someone wanted to buy tickets for a sporting event. They would go to the team website, and they would look at the seats and then view the seat or view what you would see from the seat. And it was all done in 3D. Don't ask me why, because I thought about it. As I'm doing this job, I'm like, why don't they just go? Literally, you can go just sit in the seats and just take a photo, and then take an aerial photograph, and it was all flash based stuff.
People get seduced by
they just thought it was so cool.
Yeah,
and that was the thing. So this is like around where everything was 3D, and it was just like the coolness factor. Didn't matter. Like now you go on websites now and pick your seats, and they'll actually just you will see a photograph, which is more representative of what you'll actually see.
Yep.
But it was good because that I realized I didn't want to be in Seattle anymore, and I wanted to move to LA. I didn't know what I was gonna do down here. But it kind of helped me get my first job in LA, which was working for Johnson Fain, an architectural firm.
Right. It's so weird. I didn't know that because I've always known you as a matte painter and just going to study business in Vegas and then going to Seattle to do medical informed consent machines and boots, and then going to an architecture firm. So was there anything massive that you took from the architectural firm, or was it more like the bridge to get you to get to the next job?
Yeah, it was good as a matte painter because, and I didn't know it at the time, that I kind of was doing matte paintings in a very rudimentary way.
Doing the extension of the environment.
Right. You would take existing photographs and put a piece of 3D in there and kind of make it work in a photorealistic way. I didn't have the skills yet. And architecture has its own kind of style, its own weird kind of, when you see architectural drawings or renderings, it has this kind of look that's not meant to be totally photoreal. Because I think they want things to look like, oh, this is just this real magical thing, and so that's what we were trying to go for. And I experimented many different ways with how to do that. But it also helped me because I was in Seattle, I was modeling all those architectural elements, and I was able to get pretty quick at it. And that was right around the time we were starting to do some GI, and I kind of learned about that.
What year was that?
Well, in LA, it was 2002 or something like that, or 3.
Because I remember GI, my buddy Marcos wrote Arnold back in the day, and that was for. It's funny because now it's actually a big renderer. But he wrote it for 3ds Max back in '99.
Oh wow!
And you would start to see anyone who had a beta, you could start to see all this really cool shit coming out of Arnold. And Max was getting spoiled with all these renderers: Brazil, V-Ray, Arnold, Final Render, and all the
Final Render. Holy shit!
And there was a bunch of ray trace ones that were coming out, even Raygun, a few other ones. Some were free, and Arnold was really big, and then because back then it was kind of the ambient occlusion kind of look where everything was white. and just very, very specific look. Then people started putting out these Skydome scripts instead, so that way it would simulate GI just by putting like 1,000 Omni lights around.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
The dome. It was the dome of point lights, or
And,
perfect.
But yeah, it wasn't, GI didn't really kind of pick up to like 2003 really in production. Like, so it's kind of funny.
So we started using V-Ray at work.
Well, architecture was more radiosity, like lightscape stuff like that, where you would bake in all the light caching.
So that's how when we first started was like the radiosity and stuff like that, the built-in shit in Max,
Yeah, Max 5.
And they had something like that already built into the software. Yeah. It was very it was okay, but I convinced the firm to buy V-Ray because I started just doing V-Ray on my own, and it was so much at that time was so much faster and simpler, And, I got a couple of Gnomon DVDs. Okay, so this is when I first started figuring out, oh my God, there's this place right here in LA that has a school. Oh my God, there's a school. And they're putting out DVDs and well, back then, DVDs. And I got a couple of V-Ray DVDs.
It would have been, I think, Chris Nichols stuff.
Yes, it was. And
I didn't even know that until
my God, like Chris Nichols, I learned V-Ray watching his DVDs over and over and over again.
That's cool. I didn't know, and we were shooting the shit, and he was telling me about his DVDs. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I was able to figure it, bring it into the firm and start using it very effectively. It was great. And one of the cool things about that was I realized I discovered Gnomon. And so then I started getting all these other DVDs, like perspective drawing and drawing. I just really liked the idea of all that. And then the firm came to me and said, hey, Matt, would you like to take any classes? We got, back then they were flush with money, and they were like, we want to have people, if they want to take a class, go back to school. And if you want to, I'm
only going to say because most architectural places are flush with money, but the artists never see it's like, hey, we're just coming over to your desk to see if you want to take a pay cut because, it's Friday and we're cutting people's pay.
Yeah. No, they were really good. They were really Johnson Fain believed in investing in their employees. And so I said, there's a school that I'd really like to take maybe a couple classes. And he's like, okay, well, what would you like to take? And so that's when I went on. And at the time, my boss really wanted me to experiment with different looks and kind of not photoreal. He wanted to get more on the paint. He called it painterly, which is a goofy word that I hear a lot.
Right.
But so I looked at matte painting, and I didn't really know. I kind of knew what it was. I had a peripheral knowledge of it.
What did you want? Field the Dream style, architecture or something? Or?
Well, he wanted stuff because they had this watercolor guy that they would bring in, and they loved him. And this guy each one of his paintings was $10,000. And they're like, if we could just teach Matt how to do this, make it look sort of like that.
No wonder we were believing in our artists because that is the pay cut.
And the guy was he was very eccentric, the artist. He was just kind of a weird guy, nice guy, but he would kind of go off on his own and do his thing and bring it in, and that'd be it, because it was watercolor,
you couldn't separate the layers and
couldn't alter it really. They could kind of give him a couple of notes, but really that was it. And I think that they were like, if we could just maybe get Matt to try and do something similar. And so I went into the class and I found this class, and it was taught by Ivo Horvat. And it was matte painting 101. Now the thing was, back then, all these Gnomon classes were essentially if it wasn't having to do with Maya or 3D, it was an elective, right? And so there wasn't a matte painting course,
right?
For instance. So I went in, and it was a bunch of kids, and they were 3D artists. And I remember Evo, I'd been doing probably 3D for a while at this point, and I'd understand the frustrations of doing it,
right?
And the limitations and everything. Well, the first class, in the first 5 minutes, he opened up, a bunch of images that he had worked on, and they were matte paintings. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is it.
That's great. You had the aha moment.
Yeah.
Right there.
I'm like, holy shit, because I had been frustrated with lighting and wanting to make things look the way that I had it in my mind's eye. And it was just really hard for me to make it look the way that I wanted it to look in 3D. And I'd have to experiment and do test renders and do all this stuff. And I thought, oh my God, this guy is just he's painting for instance, painting this little glint of light on this piece of metal, and how many lights and where would I have to put them to make it look like that in 3D, And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is it. And Evo his personality is kind of he's a tough guy. He's a tough cookie. You know, he's stern.
So he's hard on his artists as well.
Yeah, and like just the way that he was talking, he's a disciplined guy. I respond to that. My dad was a military guy, and so like the way that he was just talking and like giving his spiel before the class started, really, he was just talking about his stuff and what he did, and then he had everyone get up and say like what they expected to get out of the class, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, it is. You're setting expectations.
Yeah. So I stood up and I said, "Oh, my boss wanted me to take this class because he wants to make things look painterly," and Evo's like, "Well, you're not going to learn that here." He just said it straight out, just like that.
I love that.
He goes, that's not what I'm teaching. I'm teaching photoreal mapping, And I was like, oh, okay. But I already known, like, before I stood up.
The Photoshop settings and the filters that I'm kidding.
Well, that was great about Evo. So, like, that class was awesome because right away I knew that's what I wanted to do. And already in my mind's eye, like, I wanted to be a map painter and I was going to leave 3D. Like, I just, in that first 5 minutes, I knew it.
That's great.
And it was like that moment in college where I kind of knew that I was going to go to art school and I just had to graduate. I was like, I just got to graduate business and then I'll go do this. And so I already knew that. And that's, there's so few moments like that in your life where you're like, I know that I want to do this and I will do the work. Just tell me what I have to do, which was great. And that was the attitude that I took in the class. And I worked really hard and I was terrible. I was awful at first.
That's awesome.
And, but Evo was hard on me and he gave us homework assignments and I would spend so much time on these assignments. And I was dating this girl at the time and she just couldn't understand like why. Little did she know that I was preparing her for the eventuality of me working in the industry where she would never see me anyways. No. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. And the great thing about Evo's class was he's a traditionally trained artist. And so I got all that stuff that I never got, in art school. And the things that I picked up, we didn't even touch Photoshop until like the second to last class. Maybe
so
the
what
third
were you
to
painting,
last.
acrylics?
Well, we were painting in Photoshop, but we weren't using any photographs. We weren't using
the tab
any
key or whatever to make all the buttons.
I mean, we were painting in Photoshop. Like I was doing work in Photoshop, but he didn't specifically train us to work in Photoshop. For instance, he wasn't going through like, here's the brushes you should use, here's the clone tool, and here's this and here's that. No, he would just give us an assignment. So for our first assignment was like, you got and he bought this thing where he could just place like a ball, a tube and a cone, and he put a light on it, and he's like, I want you to paint that. And that's what we did. It was like a matte surface object, right? And so he gave us an image of it, and then we had to go back and paint it. And I remember, I didn't even in Photoshop I was using like gradients and like everything but a brush. Like I was so afraid to like use a brush, because I wanted it to look so real, and I was like, I can't paint it.
I've beaten this joke to death, but dodge and burn, baby.
So we had to draw everything out, like, so in perspective. Like, actually, he never gave us a picture. We had to draw it. So I had to draw, like, it was like a box, a sphere, a cone, and a tube. And we had to, like, draw them in perspective. And I remember I did my vanishing points were too close together, so it looked like this weird, like, wide-angle lens, that I was using, which he commented on. He's like,
macro photography, baby.
He's like, technically this is right, but you should. But like the actual work that I did, he's like, this looks really good, and that gave me like kind of the confidence going forward that I needed. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was like that scene in Karate Kid where Mr. Miyagi's making Daniel paint the fence, and he's like, why are you making me paint this fucking fence?
Yep.
I'm never gonna learn how to fight, and then he starts punching him and he's blocking the punches.
Yep.
And what I learned from that was, oh my God, he basically taught me how to draw in light a cone, a sphere, a box, and a tube. And if you really think about that, it's pretty much anything you're going to paint. If you understand how light reacts to those simple objects, you can paint anything. And I was like, the thought behind that was like really impressive to me. And so then he slowly integrated color, because first we were just doing black and white.
Let me jump in. Two things I was going to mention. One was, I've only done this once, but like Frantic Films, they flew me out to Vancouver from Australia one time to train all their senior staff. And so they flew everyone in from LA, from all the other offices. This is now Prime Focus, like the Vancouver office. And So one thing I did, like usually I would say like, okay, we're gonna do this, like here's the end result. And this time around, what I did instead is actually showed everyone like, look, I'm gonna show you 10 really dead simple things, and it's like, here's one technique, here's another technique, here's another technique. And what I then did is like go and proceed for the next 2 or 3 days to show all these like big movies and how to do all this shit. And it was cool because I don't know if I did it on purpose, but I just wanted to try something different, and everyone was able to pick it up like, oh, that's just technique 1 and 6 and 9 mixed together, and that's 2 and 5, and so suddenly all these little bits and pieces you're able to see applied to everything. And it was so counterintuitive, but it meant you could see the core of anything, which is the tubes, the spheres, the cubes.
And I still use that today. Like when I'm doing like skyscrapers or something, for instance, I'm like, it's just a series of boxes. So I just got to figure out the light and work with that.
And one other thing was this morning, I was thinking randomly about a buddy of mine that he's from Germany, and he was a traditional painter, and like he was telling me how he would always start out painting grayscale and then do the color later, and I couldn't wrap my head around that at the time. Like, you know, I was like 17 at the time, but I don't know, I randomly thought of that this morning, and I'm like, okay, like now being a bit older and wiser, like that totally makes sense, because you're working on the shadow, the light, the composition of the shot, and the color is just a distraction, really.
And I remember, like, you know, Evo really just got down into the base, the core of why things work and why they don't. And he taught us color after doing the grayscale stuff, because he said, and I'll never forget it, he goes, you know, people will forgive you if your colors are wrong, but not if the values are incorrect. Like you can get something and you can paint something in black and white and it will almost look photoreal. And then you add the color, and if you get that color right, then it's going to be absolutely photoreal looking and good. But he goes, if your values are wrong, but if your colors are right, it's not going to matter, you know. And then, you know, if your perspective is wrong, the colors don't matter either, you know. So like we did perspective, grayscale, value, and then we moved to color.
That's great.
And then we moved to like adding photography, which is like the final step. But he's like, I'm not gonna, you know, you're gonna be able to paint, you should be able to paint something by hand and then add photos if you need to, and really make it, that's where you just add like textures and stuff to something and make it really look correct. So it was funny because that class taught me, you know, it gave me that base, but then I wasn't ready, obviously, to be a map painter after. It was a 10-week class. I put in a lot of time, but at the very end, I'm like, I still don't know Photoshop very well. So it was great as the next class I took was taught by Alp Altener, and Alp immediately started teaching Photoshop tricks. Great. So I was so lucky because I got the best of both worlds. I got that base from Evo, and then I got the actual like technical Photoshop information from Alp, and they're both great artists, but the way that they think is different, you know, and the way how they taught their classes was completely different. But I was very lucky because once I got into Alp's class, we did a painting the first day, for instance, photographs, like, you know, and he taught us like, and then Alp was really into composition, you know, composition and lighting and aesthetics. And then here's how you accomplish those things in Photoshop. And here's exactly what I do. Here's my brushes. Here's like how you set up a file and keep it straight and keep it organized. Like
I like that.
Yeah, I was absolutely lucky in that way. If I would have taken them in the reverse order, I would have been completely stunted. It would have stunted me. You know, I just got lucky, you know.
I was thinking about this stuff, and like it's also the teaching process, because like we were talking recently about some stuff, like, you know, talking about color theory and everything the other day over beers. It was midnight, so maybe you don't remember.
No,
I'm kidding. But it was right before with the poutine, which I regret. The pizza made up for it, man. But you know, I was thinking about the process because I was thinking about that today. About you know, I think a lot of people need to be wowed before you go into the theory, and I've learned that the hard way, where I'll go and teach like theory first, and people get frustrated. They're like, no, like I wanted to learn how to do movies, and I feel ripped off because you're showing me how to do like essentially photoreal effects, but the background is not, you know, there's no tank in the background or whatever's going to make it
right,
you know. But it's like, trust me, everything I'm doing right now, put a picture in the background and you will call it, you know, it's done.
Yeah.
But the people want to see the end result to justify. There's the whole theory of like, tell someone what they're going to learn, teach them what they learned, then tell them what they just learned. But you know, a lot of people get frustrated because they want you to essentially prove yourself before you go and do anything else. And so, you know, and that's why showing a bunch of, let's say, small tricks, then the shit later on, if you weren't dealing with like the senior staff at a movie studio, they would be like, this is fucking boring. But usually it's like, okay, let's do a photoreal matte painting from Lord of the Rings. Then let me talk about color theory and shadow and lighting and perspective and all the things that you should have learned before you even touched it. So it's kind of like sink or swim, and then it's like jump of an airplane, and then we'll talk about
how to pull the ripcord.
Exactly. But unfortunately, that's how people are. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're really up there or not. Yeah. You kind of need to get that trust. Like they need to prove themselves first before you're like, okay, now it's like going to actually. Perfect analogy is this. Like I did like Krav Maga for a while with Carlos back when we were at ILM in San Francisco, and it's one of those things that even though I know I'm going in there and like you're going to learn a little shit, I'm like, just kill someone first, please. Just fucking kill someone.
Just kill someone,
and then
I will believe you.
Yes, studying with Evo and Hal.
Yeah,
and then from there, like, so if they're doing these two courses, and again, like, I guess they would complement each other. Doing theory and then doing the hands-on, and all the tricks is the shit that people want to learn right away too.
Yes.
It's like, tell me all the tricks. And
and that's kind of what Alp was the class where people were like, he definitely gave you the frosting before the cake, like it was but the thing was with Evo was when that first class where he was kind of going through his stuff, that's like he was showing like, this is what you can do, this is the final product, like he was showing us, like he did a painting for Coruscant for the Phantom Menace, and he did like the thing in Contact, that whatever that device was, the big huge
faraway shots, or
like the aerials. Like amazing stuff, I was like, oh my god, that's a.
You remember VFX HQ, right? That Todd Vazari, one of the soups at ILM, like, is a website. I got to show it to you. Like, back in the 90s, there was nothing else like this. There was like VFX Pro, which had interviews and shit. But like VFX HQ got discontinued in like 99, I think. 98. I think it's 98. But it was just like write-ups of like every movie, and it's from someone who's in the industry, so like knows the process. So like. It was really cool. It's just like every movie back then, Frighteners to Contact to everything. It was like really in-depth information about like how they were made and everything else. And that's the thing too, is like Wedo worked on Contact and a lot of movies secretly for Sony and all these other companies, because back then, before Frighteners, which put them on the map, it was the most VFX shots ever in a movie until Phantom Menace came out like a little bit later. But like Wedo was doing all shit for all these studios just under contract, so they could never really talk about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, cool. Like I was,
So he's more glass, old school approach?
Well, he painted, I think Evo always did digital work for matte painting. Because, he came on right around, I think, mid to late 90s is when he first started working in movies. And then by then it was all digital for matte painting. But, in Alp's class was great because he was teaching us those little tricks, and then like I would do, he would give us an assignment in class, and we would have to like do it and work as fast as possible. And that also was like, he was really into like speed, because Alp is very fast, so that was that. And then he would like bring everyone's work up at the end of class and like critique it, and it was great. And both those classes were great. What they gave me was after the second class with Alp, I took a workshop with Alp that he did on his own outside of Noman. He just did it by himself, and there was like 10 people in this class.
Cool.
And I remember doing one painting for one of our assignments, and he looked at me and told me, "You're ready." And I was like, "Oh my god, what?"
You put a gold star in your head.
He's like, "You're ready. What do you?" He goes, and at that time he was working at Cafe FX in Santa Monica, the Santa Monica office.
Actually, no, Grossman was in the one up north. All those guys.
Yeah. So at the time, there was the one up north, and then they had a little satellite office in Santa Monica, and it was like Cafe FX and the Syndicate. And Alp was like art director there, and he got me. I remember it was so funny. Like I worked like a few days on what was it, Dragon Ball Z.
I turned that down.
I've never seen the movie. Yep. It was my first ever work in a feature film. It was my first like matte painting work, period. And
it looked pretty insane. But...
Yeah, I did like the city. So there was like this futuristic city, and it was in the trailer actually. It was kind of cool. You kind of see like this house that's on the middle of like this like spire, like this. It was like everything had crumbled around the house, and then behind that was the city. And I did some of that work, and it was just for a few days, but all that did really was get me used to like the production, getting in there and like actually working a shot. And it was a moving shot, so it wasn't a static. So I had to paint it a certain way. get that ready. And then I also got to meet people that worked there. And basically what that allowed me was the work on Shutter Island, which was my first big break.
That's right, because it was
at the same place essentially. And so when I applied to it, they remembered that I worked on Dragon Ball. So they were like, well, let's bring this kid in. Let's see what, And so I had hardly any experience at all. I'd worked on The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves.
That is some cool
I did a few of those because I was working at the small little house. So I had left the architectural firm. I was working at the small place where we were doing a lot of TV, but we got some spillover work for The Day the Earth Stood Still. And so I did some work on that. So I at least had a few things.
So that wasn't with Syndicate?
No. And I had a few things to show them. And they gave me a chance. It was funny because in the interview I said, tell us about yourself, and I told them I was from Alaska originally, and they're like, what? This is like 3 people now on the show that are from Alaska, because Tim Ledoux was they're from Kodiak. Tim Ledoux was there. Ben Grossman was the soup on the show, and he's from in the middle of nowhere, Alaska.
Is that a town?
I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's literally it's a tiny little town. Ben was he had come up from the compositing side and started out that way.
Yeah, both him and his sister are both compers, well, compers at heart. So
yeah. But actually, Ben wasn't even in that interview. So when I started working for it, it was like, oh, you're from Alaska? Yeah, I'm from Alaska. And so that was a great opportunity for me, that Shutter Island job, because I really didn't know anything. Like I knew how to paint and do like photoreal painting, but like I didn't know like the actual technical stuff that you need to know as an artist. Like I didn't know anything about log space, linear space. Like I wasn't taught that stuff, and I'm like, what? You
kind of learned that on the way. Like no one, it's not like you go to school and it's like, let's talk about LUTs and let's talk about,
because no one knows. Like it's hilarious. I'll see some of the stuff and they'll be like, that looks incorrect. Like they photographed that wrong, and like no, it's so
it's anamorphic. We gotta
right, all that stuff, and the stuff in Shutter was, most of those shots were moving shots, where I was building my own 3D and doing my own projections, and just kind of, it was kind of neat because we had to basically do like a real rough version of all the visual effects shots the first like month that we were there, and so it was kind of a quick and dirty rough thing so that we can get the shots to the editor and they can start editing the movie. And so it was actually really good because I had to like just quickly burn through these shots and kind of set them up basic, and then I could go back and rework each one of them and make it photoreal, which was cool. And Ben was patient with me, and Alex Henning was the comp soup. And so basically I was giving stuff to Alex, and Alex would ask for things a certain way, and I would be like, he'd be like, okay, so can you get it to us in this color space and blah blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, sure. And I'd go back to my desk and Google what the hell he was talking about and try and figure it out. Like
Rec 709, what the fuck?
I'm like, I don't know, SRG what? So I had to pretend like I knew what he was saying,
sure,
and then figure it out, But they were really cool. I think they probably knew that I didn't know, and they were just like, "Oh, let's let him see it. Let's see if he can do it."
Single swim type of stuff.
Yeah, I remember I wasn't even assigned a shot, and I started doing one there. I think Ben liked that. I basically, and what I did was, it's in the movie. It was like my first shot at this painting, and and that was a thrill for me, like getting that movie and like seeing it on the big screen. And it took a while. That's another thing too. That movie was supposed to be released like the fall of that year, and it got pushed to February. And that's, and as a young artist, like I wanted it to be released so I could put it on my reel. And like, it was really hard for me to get a job after Shutter because I only had the really small stuff that I did on The Day the Earth Stood Still, and I was waiting for Shutter to come out so I could put it on my reel. And I'm like, and in the meantime, I was struggling to find work. It was a really tough time. And then that the following year, I got really lucky and got on Avatar, and that's basically what that's what broke it wide open for me, was being able to work on that. And then I met Ken Nakata, who was my supervisor, and Ken was absolutely great for me, as just
he took you under his wing or something, like.
Well, he was he was so busy. Ken was so busy, but he was tough. And again, like I kind of needed that. But everyone like on that job on Shutter or on on Avatar was really, really into it. It's funny because, like, you know, you meet people and they're jaded, and, you know, you run across people that have been working in the industry for a long time, and you get on these shows and no one's really impressed with anything anymore. You know, like, you know, but on Avatar, everyone was really into it and really energetic and positive.
You were in the Prime Focus Capitol Records building.
Yeah. And Ken, I remember I worked on his shot. It was my first shot that I was assigned, and I was given, it was someone had worked on it initially. And he's like, basically, and it was a screw up. It was a second unit shot that they didn't like correctly at all. And it was an interior of the command center. And basically,
that's the one you're looking out the window, right?
Yeah, you're looking out and you're seeing like the tarmac. But basically, I had to do the outside of which I'm going to have to do that. But they basically wanted to replace almost the entirety of the inside because it wasn't even lit.
Well, there's some shots, sorry to jump around, but like the first shot in the entire movie is all CG. And it's just like, you know, it's in a space station or whatever, I can barely remember it, but like, you know, there's a few shots where it's like it looks photoreal and there's actors in there, but the entire shot's CG, and it's just like that's because we didn't bother shooting it. Like, why not just make it 3D, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so you had to rebuild the interior as well.
Rebuild the entire interior, which was like, I was like, why am I doing this? You know, this is kind of weird. And so I remember the first day on it, and I showed Ken what I had. And basically my mistake was I was still kind of inexperienced at this time too. And like, you know, now, and I would do it completely different, but I used what was done before and built off of that. But what I didn't realize was, and I knew, I go, the perspective doesn't look right to me.
Right.
You know, but obviously he gave me this and it was already partially done. So I'm just going to continue on with the way that this person was going with it. And I showed him at the end of the first day and he's like, what the hell is this? And I was like, oh my God, what? And he's like, the perspective's wrong. He goes, and then he drew a box in the alpha channel. So he like collapsed everything, drew a box over the alpha channel, and then put the plate underneath that. And then he moved the box around to basically expose the plate through my painting.
Right.
And he's like, I want to be able to slide this over, move it around, and not tell the difference. Because what we had was the correctly lit shot on the plate. And then we had the actual shot that I was working on, which was they didn't bother to light the inside of the it was weird. I don't know what happened. So anyways, he's like, and I want the perspective to be totally right. And he goes, and I want to move this thing around and not even be able to tell the difference with colors and values. And
how does it work? You're saying that you've got this like crop area that he wants to be able to like fixate on and be able to see the perspectives always lining up no matter where.
All the perspective has to be the same. And so there was a previous shot from the same viewpoint almost that was shot by Cameron, and it was lit correctly.
Great. Okay.
And then this one that I was working on was completely, the second unit, it was a pickup shot, and it was not done right. And so basically we had to build out the whole, like the top part of the wall and the ceiling had to be all replaced. The railing on the outside was not lit, so I had to replace all the railing and then put that with the tarmac and everything else that was going to go behind that in the mountains and stuff.
Were you able to use the other shot as perspective reference to?
Yeah. And I knew in the plate I could draw the perspective lines, and I knew that it was wrong when I got it, but I kind of just went forward. Yeah, I don't want to throw it all away.
It's a bad habit that's implemented before you touch it, and you're just following.
Yes, and I was like, well, maybe that was approved before. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the worst.
And I assumed that, and I should have asked, but I didn't. I just didn't have the experience back then to really do it.
That's the worst kind of thing, because it's like, do I argue with them that this is
right?
And that happens with anything that you're doing in design or anything really in life. Like you could, you know something's wrong, and do you want to go and tell them that, like, look, I can do this, but it's going to be wrong.
Yeah.
Or do you just go do it and then wait for them to be like, oh, it's wrong? It's like, okay, now I can go do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But is that going to reflect badly on me? Because, you know, it's just like conundrum, and it really kind of comes down to like who you're dealing with, whether they have the vision or the trust to you know.
And back then, I just, you know, I thought, well, okay, obviously this maybe is not approved as far as it's gone. It's approved. Or why would they have given it to me like this? So now I would just start it from scratch.
Yep.
Because I've understood just doing...
Send hate mail to the AD who shot the shot. And but so that kind of opened the doors for you getting to...
Well, what happened was I was scared. Like, so I thought, oh my God. And he was not pleased because it was like a day wasted essentially, you know, and I remember going, oh my God, they're going to fire me. You know, like, oh God, my first day and I'm going to get fired. And I remember I went home that night and I was like... Oh,
puking your guts out.
Yeah, like, I'm like, I can't believe I got hired for Avatar and I'm going to get fired, you know? And so I decided, and it was like my first...
You wouldn't have been the first on that movie, I would have said that much.
My first day, it was weird because it was like a Friday. My first day was a Friday. Yeah. And like it was a hectic day, and you know, I think that was the other part of it too. Like they were doing dailies, and Ken was just at his wit's end as far as the whole production was going, and so just he was like short with me, you know, and I didn't really know him really, so that was the other part of it, like, you know, because I was like, oh my god, you know, like, so I remember, and we had to go into work on Saturday.
Okay. Well,
at that point, we were already in weekends. Like I literally was like, "Can you start Friday and just work all through the weekends?"
That's usually the Sony way. It's like
till we
here's
send this
your
movie out.
sevens. Welcome to the job.
Yeah. So I remember I got in. I you know, did my old thing where like in college, what I used to do, or in art school, I got in there at like 6 a.m, and I worked frantically on it until I don't know, everyone else rolled in around 10. Right. You know, and Ken came right into the room and he's like, let's see what you got. And again, he draws the box. He unclicks the link for the alpha and he starts sliding it around. And he looks over at me and he goes, that's what the fuck I'm talking about. I love LA. And walked away. I love and I was like, oh my God, I get to work another day on Avatar. Yep. You know, like, and that's when I started to learn, like, I should really like trust myself a little more, because I knew kind of initially that it was wrong. Yep. You know,
it's trust your gut.
Like, yeah. So, and then after that, pretty much all the shots went pretty smooth in that show, you know. And I came on at the very tail end. I worked about a month and a half on Avatar. But it was every single day, and it was like 12, 14, 16 hours, crazy schedule. But we were so energized, you know, for that. And we worked right up until the very end. Like, we worked until like the week before that thing, you know, was premiered. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. Like, it's funny. I've got a cast and crew shirt for Avatar. I didn't work on the film. They gave ILM was like,
I never got one.
Well, you don't mind. ILM gave me one, and I'm like, oh, thanks. Like, cool, I guess. And I got a little shiny badge or whatever, like a metal badge, like all the shit. And I'm like, all right, like, it's kind of cool, but yeah, like, you know, whereas you're right, like I've worked in movies where I went to a Burger King or something once in Australia. One of my friends from Detroit was over, and he had this Superman jacket, and he ended up getting free food at Burger King because he's like, yeah, I worked in the movie. I'm silently sitting there just like, motherfucker, like, I worked on that movie, you motherfucker. Like, you know, and he's getting all this free shit, like, yeah, like, this is the jacket I got for the movie, and it's like, oh man, you. But
I've never gotten any swag from a movie. Like,
what's the problem with freelancing too? Is you don't
you're
usually not around. You know, same thing with like, oh, we'll do a rap party, and it ends up being like a month later.
You never are there for it. Yeah,
you're already booked in something else elsewhere.
Yep.
But that's great. And like, did Chris Bond have much to do with like the project at all? Like, you were at Prime Focus, right? Yeah. Yeah. So Chris, or maybe he had left. No, he should have still been there.
I basically had contact with Ken.
Chris is the owner. Like, Chris and Ken Zorniak founded Frantic Films, and eventually they sold it to Prime Focus, and Chris stuck around because it was part of the transitioning out period, but like he was still there for a year, and then he left to make ThinkBox software, and he sold the stereo software that he owned in exchange for getting Krakatoa and X-Mesh and all the shit that now they develop at ThinkBox. But Chris, he's a really great guy, and he's, you know, the reason that company was around. Like, he had the vision to take it from like Winnipeg, Canada, which is Juneau of Canada. Yeah, right. And, you know, started out in LA, and like, we had done like a lot of productions there. I'd never worked in that Prime Focus building, but I'd been there. I've been in there 100 times for other meetings and for the visit there as well. But it definitely kind of changed a lot when Prime Focus took it over. But I thought Chris was still around because I had Kevin Boyd and all those guys. Oh, not Kevin, Chris. Yeah, but you know, it's definitely, you know, they were doing some cool stuff. But I feel like Avatar was probably like the last cool job before it started to transition down into a very different place. Start to focus on stereo more than anything.
The stereo conversion stuff. I remember I got you got a code to park in that parking lot in the garage in that building, and I used that code for like a year after.
I have codes.
I'm like, because every time I went to Hollywood, it's right down there. So I'd be like, oh no, I don't have to pay for parking.
If I need to use a restroom really bad, like, I know some
codes. So I forget what the code is now, but like, man, I used it so much. It was great. Yeah, it's right next to the Capitol Records building there. Pretty iconic area.
I've actually modeled my team's modeled the entire Capitol Records building right next to it. I just did it on a whim, and I'm like, okay, because eventually I want to destroy that building for something.
Right, of course.
And so at the moment, I'm going to be going out to shoot around there. for that. And I kind of wish the Capitol Records building was a bit taller, because it's one of those things like I want to do cool shit with it, but it'd be way better if it was like a big fucking building. It's very iconic, at least. So.
It is. It's a cool building. Yeah, like just working down there, that was really neat, you know, at the time. And then, right after that, I rolled right into Percy Jackson, which was just another crazy schedule, you know.
Man. Yeah, sorry to like. It's just funny. I think we both had a very similar schedule. Like I was wrapping up at ILM, and I actually got asked to go to Vancouver to supervise Percy Jackson at, I think it might have been MTC, and but I didn't want to go to Canada at the time, because I was just in the middle of getting my visa switched from ILM to my own shit, and so we ended up going to Farmer Brown, and hooking up there. So, but like, how long were you on Percy for?
Again, it was like maybe a couple months, maybe a month. I got brought on at the very end of that. Now I interviewed.
It could have been long, because like as soon as Avatar wrapped, I went to Farmer.
Yeah, I remember like, you know, that was at Pixelmondo, so I got hired at Pixelmondo. Before I even was done with Avatar, they contacted me, and that was when I realized, I'm like, oh my god, this movie hasn't even come out yet, but just having it on my resume, talking about Avatar, like was already getting me jobs. And Pixelmondo actually offered me more money than not what I asked for, but then I remember they asked me how much I was making, and I told them, and they upped it without me even asking.
That's the worst sign in the world.
Oh my god! Like, what's going on?
Like, how much am I, down?
Right? Yeah. At the time, I'm like, geez, what am I doing? But it was really tough, because at that time I probably worked like 6 weeks with no days off, and then I went right into Percy, which was really tough. Another tough schedule, and I worked on that until, my god, like through Christmas that year, and it was really, really tough on me. I remember I had to ask to get time off from Pixelmondo so I can go see the premiere of Avatar at like a 9 p.m. showing. I'd be like, hey, so I got to be at the movie by 9 o'clock. Could I get off a little, like 8? Getting off at 8 was like early, you know? Right. And I'm like, they were like begrudgingly allowed me to do that, you know, but I could tell it kind of irked them, you know? And I'm like, oh, this is insane. It was my birthday too. So that was my, the day that Avatar came out was my birthday. You had to bring like a death
of the family certificate or something to like.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, it's my birthday and I want to just go see this movie that I worked on, and can I get off a little early, 8 o'clock p.m., you know, like, and it was just insane. But doing those two movies back to back like really helped. And then after that, that's when you and I met. Basically, was at the same building in Venice, was where Pixelmondo was, their first building.
I was going to rent that space out, because it was right around the time.
Yeah, we were overflowing out of that thing. It was ridiculous. And then just on the other side of the building was where Farmer Brown was.
It's funny too, because I was leaving ILM and everyone's like, "You're leaving? Like, where are you going?" Like, right. Know? And I couldn't tell anyone I'm going to like Farmer Brown, like, you know, because it sounded so. It sounded like Trader Joe's, you know. So
you're going to work at a sausage company?
Yeah, I had to be like, oh, I'm going to LA to like, you know, just for, because I was going to go work on Priest, and that was like a big production at Spy Post, and but there was a bit I got a call from Juan Grania to like come to LA, and I'm like, you know, it'd be fun to go down there for a bit. And I'd met him like 10 years ago at Blur. He like freelanced there occasionally, and so, and I knew Tim as well, so it was just like, I thought it'd be fun. And so the thing is, I just couldn't really tell people, like, no one had heard of that place, and so I was just like, oh, I'm just going to this ex-Blur staff that like started a company, and it was something fun. And I remember having a conversation with Juan, and he, I'm like, okay, everything's fine. Just the only thing is, do not put me in the Jolly Roger Hotel, because like Blur was notorious for putting like. I went there once, and I remember them recognizing me after not being there for years, and like I felt sick, because like I think accumulatively I've spent over a year living in that hotel, and it's a shitty hotel. It's on the corner of Abbot Kinney and Washington Boulevard. Yeah, in Venice, and so like I told him, like, I will come down, just do not put me in the hotel. And we kind of laughed about it, because like we both knew that place. Yeah. And then I'm flying down, and Tobin Kirk calls me, and he's like, hey, this is Tobin, and
we got you booked.
He's got his producer voice on, and he's like, we're going to put you in this place. And I'm like, can you talk to Juan? But I'm like, okay, whatever. And flew down for that. And it was just funny. So like, day one, I think, or whatever, like we both started, and I remember, because like I've talked to you about this. Like I used to do my own matte paintings when I'm like 14, and that's before I really knew what matte paintings were. But like I was obsessed with doing effects, funny that, and so I'd blow shit up, and I would need to go and get like a photo or footage, and I would then go and paint out like wherever the destruction is. I'd paint what's behind it and go through that. Or sometimes it's easier to paint a lot of destruction that you would not be able to do with 3D. And so I used to love that. That was part of my process. And, I was always obsessed, like when I realized that was matte painting, I was obsessed with it. But like, it's not like I knew I would never want to do that for a living, or I would never be good enough to do that for a living. But I still love that process. And, it just became like my thing. Even, I would follow like Craig Mullins, which I know you hate me for because I'm going to be hanging out with him next month.
So jealous.
But yeah, Craig Mullins was like a huge inspiration for me. And we were joking about like how visit his website now, and it's still the fucking same website as it was back in like 95. Yes. And, like for me, it was like a huge learning experience getting to do with all that. And I've always kept that kind of as part of my process to some degree. But again, I would never pursue matte painting. But like, sitting down with you and Tim Madney, I'm like, okay, like the way that I do things is I paint out like what I want, because it's easier to figure out all that shit before you get into 3D, where it just becomes way more complicated. And I'm not going to sit on like day one, because whenever you start a new job, you always feel like you got to make that first impression and then slack off. No, I'm kidding, but everyone's going to judge you on day one. And so like I got in there and I'm like, I'm not going to sit next to two fucking matte painters and like do my shitty little scribbles and get judged or whatever. So I'm just, but it was cool. Like I like getting to sit next to you guys, and the whole team was just a fun place.
It was a good little team. And yeah, it was one of the first times where I worked on something and then ended up like visiting there later. So we did a bunch of like aerial stuff for Berlin for that game.
Oh, right.
And then I went to Berlin and I knew where everything was.
That's right. Yeah.
And that happened to me later on when I worked on Da Vinci's Demons, where I worked on this show that took place in Florence. Yep. And then I ended up going and visiting Florence, and I kind of knew the city because I was like, I would study it for the shots we were doing.
I worked on Transformers and I went to Chicago. I'm like, wow, like these buildings were actually real. They just look fake.
I remember we went and had Glühwein somewhere, and I was like, I got to take a piss. And I'm like, I know, I'll go to the American Embassy. And I'm like, and I went, I knew where it was. I knock on the door and there's Marine there, and I'm like, I need to use the bathroom.
Really?
And he's like, yes. And he's like, what? No, you can't come in here. I'm like, I'm an American citizen. He's like, I don't give a shit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
After a couple of Glühweins, you think you can just use the bathroom at the American Embassy in Berlin?
We're talking about that. I think, did I have anything to do with you wanting to go to Europe? Because I don't know. There's been a few times now where I'm like talking about travel, and because I know at that time you had made that decision on a whim to be like, fuck it, I'm going to go to Europe after this.
Yeah, that was my first European trip. Was after that show. I'd made it a chunk. I remember, I'd basically been working like 3 months nonstop, almost with hardly any days off. And so, and I had a chunk of money, and I had a friend that I met a girl, and she was living in Hamburg, and I kind of just, thought, she invited me out there. She was like, why don't you come out? You've never been here. And so it just happened to work with the timing of that show. I remember I left right after we finished that project. And that's when I got the travel bug. And I would bring my camera over there and just shoot a ton of reference, and that way I could write off a portion of the trip, to my company, which is also great, So I've gone back at least once a year since then.
You've been going a lot. I've got a few friends where we just start talking about that stuff, and if they've never done it before, it's such a scary thought, and then they do it, and it's just like, holy shit, this has changed my life. I went to Nadel's wedding, and that was in like Manhattan Beach, or a bit further away, and on the Uber ride over there, I'd gone from this girl who was driving me had never traveled to, she was going to book a flight later that week to Thailand, because just every single barrier that she had about like, well, I don't know about this, and like my friends won't be able to go because it's going to be too expensive. I'm like, well, just get a cheap group house, and that way you're all joint money together, and that will compensate for this and that. And every single like little push that she had, I'm like squashing that. Like, so by the end of it, it's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
That's
and
cool.
I'm like, good, okay.
Yeah.
Inspiring people to get around. But no, that for you was like a big changing.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would go over and I've gone there a lot since then, and I've gone by myself a lot. Like I'll go meet people, and the more I go there, the more people I meet and friends I make. And so I'm not necessarily by myself the entire time. I'm visiting people, but there's also moments where, well, for instance, when I was in Florence, I was there for a week by myself, and then I went and visited my friend Verena in Germany, and then I went to Amsterdam and met up with a high school friend there, and then I went to Paris for a few days by myself, and then I went to Florence after that. But then I doubled back through Austria and met up with another friend.
Yep.
You know, so it's not like I'm there by myself the whole time, but I am doing a lot of traveling, and that is intimidating when you first start doing it.
Yeah,
I took a train from Florence to Vienna, and it was like a 16-hour train during the night.
Oh man.
And I was at one point I'm sleeping in a cabin with like 3 other people that I had no idea who they were. And like at some point in the night they had gotten off. You know,
really?
like, well, it was like there was a couple, and then there was another girl and myself, and we were all kind of just lying. You know, it's weird how the seats fold down and you're kind of like head to toe.
Wow.
You know, it was really, you know, and then like at one point in the middle of the night, they got off. I think we went through Switzerland
With your bags, no kidding.
yeah. And then it was just me and this girl sleeping in there. It was kind of weird, but yeah. And then I stayed in Vienna for a couple days, and then met with some people later. You know, so and you know I've gone skiing out there in Austria a few times. But
you sent me a picture one time, and there's like a little tiny piano in the background. I'm like every house in Europe seems to have like a little tiny piano or something. You know.
Yeah, that was the Haub house in Hartberg, Austria. Yeah, you're right. Everyone has a piano. Everyone's like, you know, that's the other thing too, like music and having like a skill set, an art, you know, like on the art side, whether it's music or anything else, is very valued typically over there. So that's also what I picked up. So yeah, I think it's helped me as an artist just by going there and photographing things and just experiencing things.
How did you meet a lot of these people? Because that's the thing too. Is like most people, like apart from Facebook, like they don't really know many people. It's like, how are you kind of getting around and making friends?
Well, I met Verena and Astrid just at this bar in Santa Monica. Yeah. And I was with a friend of mine, and I asked if I could sit down next to them. It was like a bench seat, you know, and I just started talking to them. And then from there, I guessed that they were from Austria. I don't know why I thought that. They were speaking English, but I could tell they had a German accent. And I just guessed Austrian.
Hello, wie geht's?
I knew nothing. I knew nothing how. Yeah. Now I can speak a little bit of German, but I didn't know anything. And we kind of just kept in touch. And then they invited me out. And from there, I just met more of their friends and their family. And then like, you know, snowballed from there, where I know quite a few people. I just was, that particular day just felt outgoing. You know, like you have those days where you want to chit chat with people, and other days you don't. It was one of those times where it was just easy to talk to them. You know,
that's cool.
Yeah, and we're still really tight this many years later or whatever. Yeah,
that's really awesome. Yeah, because I think most people get really intimidated, like even the idea of traveling. So you know, it's kind of like, well, yeah, it can be, but you know, I think if you just go out, you're going to naturally start. Like I used to be scared shitless of going out by myself, and I remember one night I just decided I'm going to go out with pen and paper and just start writing and thinking about, you know, stuff I want to do, planning my year. And a bunch of girls came up and they're like, "You're not allowed to sit by yourself. You're sitting with us." And by the end of the night, you know everyone in the whole place, just because you kind of get to know everyone. And then, you know, fast forward 2 days later, you know everyone in town, and but you know it is. You know, you need to actually get out there, and just being, you know, making yourself available is all you need. And from there, like anything could happen, you know?
Right.
So,
most people are approachable if you know,
like making friends, that's all you need to do. It's not like you need to go out with any intention of like anything more. And like, you know, I've made so many friendships just by being out, you know? Yeah. It's good. I think there's nothing better than just kind of like, what are you going to do if you're at home? What are you going to, you know, what kind of experience are you going to have there? Whereas you go outdoors, like you might be hanging out and the bartenders are like, well, we're closing soon, but we're going out now. And it's like, oh, sweet. And then suddenly 2 days later, you know, all the bartenders in town, you're getting free drinks and recommendations, or
you never
whatever.
know. You never know. Absolutely.
That's cool.
Absolutely. I met this Finnish couple last year, or a couple of New Years ago. So it's just a little over a year now. And they were staying, matte painter friends of mine, Steve Matson. He has like a place in Manhattan Beach, and it's he rents out one of his rooms as an Airbnb place. So I went over to his party, his New Year's Eve party, and there's this couple, and they're just gorgeous, both of them, and just tall, statuesque.
They're so pretty and European.
Yeah, like you're so like beautiful and blonde, and they were and they were really cool. And I'm like,
so on PC, like you're so Aryan. I could tell that was a baby. Like some guy came up and told my mom and I that were. I was like, wow, I'm not sure if I should be offended or not, but
right. And they were in LA because they wanted to surf, and I was like, well, where are you guys from? And they're like, we're from Finland, and I'm like, what? And I go, is there surfing in Finland? And they're like, yeah, but not, it's just not something that you can't do,
it's more
all year
lakes
round,
and,
obviously. But they're like, we travel around the world, and we like to go surfing, and we've been here, and so I was fascinated by the whole thing when I met him. And
you can't surf when all the water's frozen over.
Although the guy today, because I'm buddies with him, and I've kept in touch with this guy Ludwig and his girlfriend Maria. But he was like snowboarding and like kite surfing. So like kite surf snowboarding today, and posted that, and I'm like, what the fuck? That's awesome.
That's great.
But I just was fascinated by them, that they were so outgoing and traveling and surfing, and they're from Finland, and I'm like, that's just so, he was like really into, he's like does some sound engineering and stuff, and she's like she's a teacher, but she also does like CrossFit, and she like teaches, she's like does personal coaching and stuff like that for
so weird for Finnish people, because I love Finland. I've been there 100 times, and but like Finnish people are, like
typically very reserved, right?
Best way to put it is, I got picked up at the airport one time, and the guys were like, hey, just to let you know, like, if we sit in a room and we don't talk to you, we're not being rude. And I didn't really get it at the time until, it's just like people can gladly just sit in. There isn't like this uncomfortable silence that America might have, where it's like, I have to say something, and you have this forced conversation. It's like, if you say something, you're going to say something. It's not going to be like, I must say something because otherwise... But I was seeing a lot of Americans would come over and have that issue where it's just like, these people are ignoring me, and and which if you just don't understand it. So I appreciated them saying that. But I met a girl like literally the week before I moved, like went to Rovaniemi in the Arctic Circle, and so it's cool. I'm like, oh, you're from Finland. Like, I want to get to know you just so I can know what to expect over there. And she's basically like, no one is like me. You're just this outgoing, person. She's just like, I expect the opposite over there. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, they are pretty outgoing. And I think a lot of that has to do with their traveling that they've done. They haven't just hung out and Finland their whole lives, They're unique because their village that they're from is they speak Swedish there.
Wow. Okay.
So, but they also obviously have to know Finnish. So, but they speak Finnish with an accent. So, when the first time they went to Helsinki, they were kind of like people in Helsinki knew that they weren't from there, and they obviously spoke with this weird accent. So for them, they've always kind of, I think, both felt like outsiders wherever they were, because I think she had family in Sweden, and so they would go there. But obviously, when they spoke Swedish there, it wasn't quite correct, and so I think that kind of like is part of it. But so I kind of mention offhand, and this is another thing that's really interesting about Europeans versus Americans, is I mention offhand, like when I met him initially, I'm like, well, if you ever want to come out again,
and people were like, okay,
you could totally like stay at my place, like stay at my place for like a week, and like, and they're like, all right. And then, we kind of just started talking about something else. And then like a month later, I get a text or an email from Ludwig, and he's like, guess what? We're coming in June.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, he's like, so, all right, I'll see you. Like, and he like had the dates down and everything. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess we're doing it.
It's this episode of The Office where eventually their company gets bought out or whatever. And the new CEO tells like Michael, what's he that like, hey, if you're ever in wherever it was. That's right. Yeah. And then like he emails her, and he's like, hey, I'm going to come down and stay at your house. And she's just like this awkward conversation.
This kid in Austria, actually, I met his this guy who's dating the kid's mom. So I met this bartender in Vienna. I think, you were so kind to, give him some free videos, because he was into FX. Right. I think that's what he wanted. He's 16, I think now. I mean, he was 15 when we first started chatting, or maybe 14. But this guy It was interesting. I was there with my buddy Elias, and we were talking to this couple, and they asked us what we did. And I met Elias when I worked on Avatar, and so this bartender, I could tell like his ears perked up when he heard us say like what we did, and he started coming over. And he's like, "Hey, I have this my girlfriend's son is really into this, and it would be cool if you could maybe meet him." And so I said, "Okay, I'll meet him." And so we had gone like skiing. And I told him, like, we're going to go skiing and then we're going to come back to Vienna and then I can, meet him. And I did. And then we sat down and chatted. And then I think after that I asked you, hey, do you think you can help this kid? And so I don't know what he's done since then. His reel was, impressive. He did a couple things just on his own where he shot video and then, composited some explosions and other things in there, and he was doing all this other stuff too. He was doing like
I was just curious if he's at like Pixamondo, Stuttgart now or something. And
I don't know. I mean, like he's still in high school.
Okay.
But we chatted, and his stuff was. I told him his stuff was good enough that he could probably get his foot in the door somewhere with just what he had.
That's cool.
But we haven't really maintained contact since then. I went back to that bar.
Oh, you did?
To try and see if I could, and he wasn't there. The bartender wasn't there that I had met. But there was this other guy there, and he remembered me.
That's
He's
cool.
Like, you're the guy from Alaska, and I was like, holy shit! It was like a year and a half later, or 2 years later, or something.
Like how do you know that? It's like there's a picture on the wall of like do not surf.
I don't know. That's so strange. And I was there with this girl, and she's like, that's unbelievable. And she's from Austria, and she's like, this is ridiculous.
Yep.
Vienna is one of those weird cities though. Like you go there and like. In the summer, you hear everything but German almost. It's such a, there's all these tourists and it's a very, international city. And that kind of irked her because she was like, everyone's not speaking German. And this guy was English. So it was it's actually an Australian bar in Vienna. And so you have to know English perfectly. And they speak English in the bar. Like they don't speak German.
I love there's an Australian bar in Austria,
Because they have that whole thing. There are no kangaroos in Austria.
Yeah, I was talking about that 2 nights ago because one of my friends, she's from Germany, and like we got on this big rant about the Dutch and then somehow about Austria.
There's only 2 things I can't stand in this world, and one of them is people who have no appreciation for others' cultures. What's the second thing? Excuse me? You said 2 things. Oh yeah. The Dutch.
I think I was imitating Goldmember from, it's like, hey, I'm from Holland. Like, isn't that weird? do you want to smoke in a pancake? So yeah, you go to the
an unfortunate schmelting accident.
One of my friends, she's a photographer in Austria, and I met her in Vancouver, and she was always telling me about. At the Austrian airport, like they have like the T-shirts.
Yes.
There's no kangaroos in Austria. So like one time I was at the Austrian airport. I'm like, I gotta look around, and fair enough, there was.
Yeah.
It was closed, but they had the shirts, and you could see them through the window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're ever in Vienna, Crossfields is the name of the place.
Crossfields.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually it's pretty good.
Like my friends from Alaska. Oh, Matt.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap stuff up in a minute.
Yeah.
But like I thought it'd be fun just because. Even though I think the last time we were just like straight into VFX and everything else, but I think there's a lot that for people who let's say don't travel, like just kind of having the realization of like, holy shit, small freaking world, and you go to Austria and go to an Aussie bar and it's possible. But I think all this is really vital. But like for you these days, I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about your process, I mean, when you initially start a shot, like how did, and we have talked about this before, but like how do you sit down and just be like, all right, time to start busting out the highlights and shadows? Obviously not, you go through and mentally figure things out, or do you go into 3D and start like blocking it all out for perspective? Or
I mean, it really depends. But I mean, in the best of both worlds, you would do a concept first, or see a concept.
Yep.
That sometimes happens, and then you start blocking things out. Either in 3D, which you can do, or you start really just roughing in some like big paint strokes, I mean, it's great if you have the time to do that. I can say the last shot that I worked on, we did not receive a concept, and we started immediately blocking things out in 3D. So we received a plate, and this is for Game of Thrones, and so I can't describe the shot, but we received the plate, and basically like 80% of it we throw away immediately, maybe 90. And so we keep this little portion, and then I get like a 3D element from Montreal. So our home base is Montreal. It's where our 3D is from, and so I get that
because rodeo effects is French for rodeo fence.
Yeah, rodeo. We realized though right away that the layout was incorrect, and so we basically took it in to a different. We were using Cinema 4D in Venice because it has a great projection tool set
Yeah, Cinema 4D for motion graphics and for matte painting seems to be the tool.
It's great. Yeah, it's really, really great. So he basically took and they're working in Maya up there, and we're using Arnold as a renderer for this season. And so basically I just took like the bare bones layout, and we started altering the geo because we realized it wasn't right. And we would just send that back and forth. Now it's basically like a gray shaded model, and I'm lighting it, and I'm putting like a little bit of color in there. And what I realized later is like as I'm giving it to them, they actually started requesting everything done that way from that point on. They're like, we really like this. So whatever you're doing, like when you're sending us like layout approvals, please just keep doing this. Because I think just having instead of just having like a 3D snapshot, I lit it with some, global lighting and just a direction and like a base color. But anyways, for that shot, that's what we started with. And then I start actually doing the painting immediately because it was such a tight schedule. This really depends also on whether it's a movie or television show. TV is typically a faster paced environment. Movies you typically will get as a matte painter some sort of concept, if not for the shot you're working on, for the sequence.
Because usually it's the client's going to be actually have like someone internally who's been working on the treatment.
They've done that months ago. They did it pre-production stuff. So in that case, you will get something, maybe, so you're working on like a battle sequence, and you'll get something for that. Not maybe specifically to the shot you're working on, but you'll get an idea. And so you'll get like color cues, lighting, direction, and then you'll get your plates, obviously, and that will determine where everything's coming from. And then from there, you start building it up. And I basically start as a, broad strokes first, getting things in, and then working typically from back to front, start with my sky, and then work towards camera, and just keep fine tuning it and adding detail where it's needed. The old school matte painters would do really basic brush strokes where you're not supposed to look, and then do refined strokes.
Pay attention to where your eyes focused. And
that's a big part of it too. Now, it used to be where they would design shots, and they would really think about them and how they're composed, and like really like this is where we want people to look. Nowadays, there's so much going on in shots typically where you as a matte painter are like, where should I be drawing people's eyes? And they're like, everywhere. They should be looking at everything, and that's what we were talking about earlier with the 4K and like pixel fucking, and you can really get in there now and like look at a pixel, and which is, for matte painting and for composition stuff, it's not good because you kind of lose focus on where. What is the point of the shot?
But you control that with lighting as well, because there's a lot of tricks you can apply to what you're doing to keep the eye focused on where it needs to be.
Yes. So the shot that I was working on, and there's a lot of FX that are going to be added in post or on top of what I'm doing. Thankfully, it's not a moving shot.
The dragon's keeping still. I'm kidding.
Oh, actually, no, it is. They actually decided they were going to push in and then do like this 2D pan, which I'm not sure how it's going to look.
Oh, right.
But, yeah.
That's why you shoot it at 4K, so you can do that.
Yeah, and I've had other shots where, I worked on Steven Spielberg Alien movie. That's not good. Not E.T. What was it?
Super 8?
Super 8, thank you. Where I got a really rough painting from, I think it was ILM, had done this shot, and where I had done this painting way before they started shooting the film. And then I was tasked with doing the matte painting, but it was so rough that I'm like, I don't even know what this is supposed to be down here. Like, it's just a bunch of colors. And my boss at the time looked at me and said, well, I want to be able to like look at that painting on one monitor and look at your matte painting on the other and like not be able to tell the difference. And he like stood like 5 feet behind my monitors. And so I literally just grabbed his shoulders and made him step like another 5 feet back. And he's like, okay. And you
turn him around 100
Yeah,
degrees.
exactly. He's like, okay, I guess from back here if it's the same. Because so there's cases where you're just kind of roughing it in and you don't really know specifically what it's supposed to be.
I was out drinking beers with a couple of the matte painters at ILM one night, and this is after I'd finished there, and they were like, "Hey Alan, like I think I'm working on like a remake of Close Encounters or something. Like I don't know what it is, but it's Spielberg and like there's lens flares everywhere. It's like crazy." And like no one knew what it was because it was for the trailer and that was before it got announced. And you know how JJ is with everything. In fact, he's like the master of misdirection.
Yeah.
Put signs up in Star Wars like, "Please stop telling everyone this is the cast and crew that the Millennium Falcon's in this movie when it's not." And it's like, you know, because it is in the movie and people are telling people about it. But yeah, like, no one knew what they were working on. Basically, it was a top secret JJ project with Spielberg, producing, and you know, so they were like, "I think it's Close Encounters, like the remake or something, or the sequel."
Yeah.
And they're like, "It's like lens flares everywhere." And then, you know, a few days later, you know, the trailer comes out, and then everyone's like, "Oh, okay, it's Super 8, awesome."
Yeah.
Yeah. But like the turnarounds on that were pretty intense. Like,
yeah,
you were at Scanline for that, right?
Yeah, I was at Scanline, and we did the whole train wreck sequence, and it was really fun to work on. I mean, at that time, Scanline would get jobs based on the full line software, being able to use that, and then I would get like whatever matte painting supported those shots. So typically, it was what we were doing. But it was really thrilling for me because I got to meet Dennis Muren. I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" And I get introduced to Dennis Muren as this is Matt Conway, the matte painter, and yeah, it was thrilling for me. Like I think a lot of people get starstruck by actors or actresses. With me, I'm like, oh my god, this guy.
He's a tall guy too.
He is super tall. Yeah,
you said
it was like shockingly tall. Yeah. Same thing when I met Quentin Tarantino. I met Quentin Tarantino at a Metallica concert. We were getting our bracelet at the same time. To like be able to buy beer there, and like I just remember looking up at him and going, "Holy shit, this guy is tall."
One of my friends met him. Like he was sitting next to him in a theater, just like a random like arc light or something like that, and he just like looks over and it's Tarantino, and he looks back again, and Tarantino's like, "Yeah, it's me," and he just like goes back to watching the movie.
Yeah,
but yeah, Muren, he's just you know, it's just one of those people who's just like, please shut up and let him talk because this is information I'll never. Just, even just seeing how he like looks at shots. Just, Like I've had times where he'd just standing in the hallway and he'd be talking about like, oh yeah, like Empire Strikes Back, like we're doing the redwood forest stuff, and like I would be up in a tree like trying to shoot down, trying to figure out how to do the shot, and it's just stuff like that. It's like, whoa, like that's shit from my childhood,
And he figured out how to do the aerial shot of the Tauntaun running. Stop motion Tauntaun with a moving camera. And I'm like, dude, come on, that's amazing. Yeah. And it looked great.
All those people who, Gleekus and a few other people coming up with like the doing a steady cam, building those sorts of rigs back in the day. Like motion control, a lot of stuff. Like so like you got introduced as like, Matt the matte painter.
The matte painter. Yeah. That's a running
You're never gonna live that down.
It's like I'll never hear it enough. But it was thrilling. I mean, in the best case scenario, I'll have time to think about shots before I start them. Really think about them, like going through reference. I think a lot of people kind of skip that step. They just want to start
jump
painting.
In the trenches, and they just, if anything, they're digging a hole for themselves.
Right. I think people they want to show something right away, and I think that I mean, obviously, if you don't have a lot of time, then you got to start. But you also do need to think about the shot. And typically what I like to do is spend a few hours just going through general reference, not something that I may use in the painting, but just like the lighting for a shot, or just looking if it's in a like a desert or something, just looking at desert
or even
photos,
the mood. Sometimes it might even be relevant. It's like,
exactly. It might be just a really terribly low res piece of shit JPEG, but it's great for what you're doing, like just to get the idea of the colors.
I have so much reference stuff, but I still remember specifically that one image where I kept the thumbnail because and to this day, even though I've seen the image 1,000 times and I don't have it anymore, but like maybe I do on a CD or something, but like there's like a little thumbnail.
On a zip drive.
A 1-inch big, like, the size of my thumbnail. It's so tiny that like my eye sees like this completely different image, and I'm like, fuck yeah, that makes me think of something else. And I'm always on Vimeo, even like looking at stuff that I think is looks like shit, but the idea I like, and I want to go and do my spin on it. But there's like this little image. Whenever I click on it, it's a completely different image, and I'm like, oh, that's not what I want. But I keep that little thumbnail. And that is like, oh yeah, it's fucking exactly what I want. So you got to collect that stuff because it's going to shape how you work.
I mean, I ended up working on a Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter with Evo. I know. But we did the opening shot of that movie, which is the big, long, like wraparound flyby of
of the Washington Monument in DC, and it shows like the construction occurring, and it's like this it's this time lapse basically. And so for that, I mean, I gathered a bunch of photos for us. And there was some photos where it was just like, we knew it was like sunset or sunrise.
Is it just like a giant vampire steak?
Hey, that's not, hey, I didn't even think about that. But it was just like sunset shots with like light just raking over the tops of these trees. And it was low res crap, Yeah. And Eva was like, oh man, that's really cool. Yeah, that totally is what we're looking for. That is what we need to show, and so it's like, yeah, we're not going to ever use this particular thing, but just to get it, and like there was time to do it, because we had time to really plan the shot, and sometimes, man, you don't, you have to know, I guess, and this comes with experience. You kind of know, like, do I have the time to spend on this?
Yep.
And if I do, then I should do it, because you can jump ahead of yourself, and then it's going to cost you later if you don't do the work.
You take the shortcuts now, and then later someone's like, we want to do this. It's like, oh, you don't understand. Like, if you shift the camera a little bit this way, the illusion is gone, because it's literally just like cardboard cutouts. And
and I've had people like comment like, oh, that doesn't look right, and I'll be like, no, it's actually, that's what it looks like in real life, and I'll have a photograph to show them. That I pulled up before, and that's the reason why I did it that way. And so you can justify things you've done using reference you pulled also.
That's something that sometimes I've experienced, where you might bring up footage first and you show them like, what do you think of this? And it's like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm like, great. Now I'm going to show you what I was going to show you, because otherwise you would have shat all over it. But I just want to establish this is real. Now I'm going to show you,
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, they're expecting everything to be like studio lit, and perfect.
Right. And that's the thing too. There's these certain trends that occur in visual effects that aren't necessarily photoreal or realistic, but we go through these like phases where like you were talking about earlier, lens flares everywhere, or just there's little things that happen that you're like, I don't really particularly like that myself.
JJ the other day, he was talking about anamorphic stuff, and like even his wife is like tone this shit back, like, because like he did it just for Star Trek, because it was more about like making the future so bright and intense, and that kind of bled into a few of this other stuff. And so Star Wars, which I still have to see, god damn it.
You are terrible.
I know. And but yeah, he was saying that like he's purposely gone out of his way not to. We'll wrap up in a sec, but
sorry.
But I know, Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. I'm American.
But he's purposely gone out of his way not to like use many lens flares.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard that same thing where his wife was like, "You need to take it down."
Yeah, it's like this is too distracting.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll wrap it up. For me, like I kind of figured we can go on a lot of other stuff rather than going specifically hands on. But I kind of think that we should do a beer and talk like the technical aspect of things, because I do think that your approach, and also just how you even start shots, let alone trying to final shots, like there's just so much that I think you can bring to the table. And I'm sure there's gonna be people like, dude, if you just shut the fuck up about Stallone and Arnie and pumping iron and everything else and got right into this, then I could have learned some shit. But it's just I always get fascinated with like how people get started and their transition, because there's always key takeaways that people can have, where it's like, oh, you know what, like I didn't realize this commonality where people going out and networking suddenly seems to be a very key thing, or by spending a little bit of time socializing in a job, you end up getting carried onto other projects because you got to meet people, and instead of being like, that person's really talented but I don't know who they are, and it's all really vital. I guess you've met Dan Catcher, right, who models all the dragons and everything for Game of Thrones.
No.
Really?
No.
Man, okay. No, it's just funny because like there's so many people working Game of Thrones, and he worked at Pixo doing all the modeling for them, and then eventually he left Pixo, and they basically were like, we want you to design the dragons directly on the client side. And so he's literally been the father of the dragons from the very beginning. Cool. So like, he's the one who's made them grow up, and kind of change them over time. But
that's really cool.
But yeah, it's like so many people are like so many key people working on Game of Thrones, and it's such a
well, it's very compartmentalized too. Like there's a lot of different companies working on it, and the crossover there is like we do the environments. We are really, I mean, Rodeo is done. I don't think we do any of the creature work at all. It's all done with Pixelmondo or this gentleman that you were talking about. But yeah, we create the environments that the dragons are in, but not themselves. But there's just so many places coming together and doing this work.
Well, that's the great thing too, is like it's not like it's something where you're gonna go out to Scotland and UK and shoot around there, but it's not like there's a place you can shoot where you're not gonna need to do some treatment to it. Like every shot is gonna need something.
Right.
And so it's great. It's one of these places you can go to town and build all this stuff
up.
It's
based in reality, but it's also a fantasy, and so you have the kind of the flexibility, I guess, or you can get a little creative with everything, just make it a little more fantastical than what it is, but still obeying the laws of light and color and all that.
I had Mark Simonetti, who he's been on the podcast, who does all the book covers directly for JR, and that was kind of cool.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool that he's had a lot of interaction with him and getting to do all the art for that sort of stuff. So
that's so cool. Yeah. Like, I mean, when I'm doing, specifically for Game of Thrones, I'll look up whatever, like if I'm doing something for Marine, I'll look up Marine online, and there's a lot of cool fan art out there, that people have done. But before even the television show came out, people were trying to figure out what these places looked like. And I mean, a lot of it is really amazing stuff. Like, maybe like more bold than the show would have taken it, So there's little pieces of those things you can take and add in, because of course our show has to look more real, and kind of work with the sets that they built.
Yeah, less fantastical.
Yeah. But, gosh, like we were working on Vast Dothrak, where the Dothraki city, and there's these really cool like concepts online of these, they have like the classic gait of the horses. But like there's other, like how people imagine those statues were. It's like so much, like, I hate to say it, more interesting in some of them, than what was actually done.
Yeah.
And just little things like that, but or like the size of them, or just something like that. Like, so it's been fun looking at things online, and then taking something from that, whether it's just this little portion or the kind of the aesthetic that they were going for. Because those artists, man, they were, creating, back then it was just the books, there was nothing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I liked how Lord of the Rings, when Peter Jackson started working on that, he, rather than just kind of going with just his vision, he went and got Alan Lee, and I keep forgetting the other dude's name. You know his name. The other concept painter who came in at the very beginning. I believe you. Maybe you don't, but basically it's like two concept painters who've done like all of this work painting the Lord of the Rings universe for so long, and they're very famous for it. So like, why not bring these two people in who've like made it their life's work, to be so passionate about something, and get them to kind of help kind of shape this vision, and I think that just kind of pays off, kind of having people who have been, with it in one way or another. They've put themselves in front of it for so long that like, when you come to this fresh new world, you're going to be able to adapt and take a lot of that previous work to what your vision is going to be. So no, that's cool. I think it's really beneficial to borrow from all these other worlds that have already been kind of preconceived.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it at all. I mean, just the same way you would go and look at a bunch of photographs for general reference. There's nothing wrong with looking at some conceptual art or fantasy art. Yeah. There's a lot to take away and a lot to learn from it. Because one thing about matte painting is, it's supposed to be photoreal, but there should be some sort of magic to it too. Like people will forgive you if you add a little glint or not a flare, but like, a glow or something here and there that wouldn't be there. People will respond to the coolness factor, and respond positively to that. So you don't want to get yourself into this rut where you think it should look exactly like a photograph.
Exactly. Reality's boring.
Right. If you could photograph it, you would.
Yep. Exactly.
So there's, you can take that way overboard too and end up with The Hobbit. So
let's get some barrels and
God. Yeah, I think a lot of mistakes were made in comp for that show, but I'm sure the matte paintings were beautiful.
I had one of the compers from Weta who worked on The Hobbit on here as well. But it's just brutal conditions in terms of schedule. Like you got to turn out so much that it's just like, all right,
right. And who knows what kind of direction they're getting? Like that's the other thing. I used to be very critical of shows when I would see them, and then I've worked on a few where it's almost like, I was told to do it that way, even though I disagree.
Yep.
What they're asking for. So I always take it with a grain of salt. I'm like, well, what was the schedule, and who was telling them?
We've done that when reviewing reels to like build a team, and it's just like, oh man, that was terrible. And it's like, well, look, all of so-and-so's other work's really great, so maybe there's a story behind that. Yeah. And it's like, 24 hours, motherfucker. Like, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's always a reason usually behind it.
Exactly, yeah.
But so which team are you going for in Super Bowl today?
I want the Broncos to win because I would love to see Peyton Manning win a Super Bowl and then retire. I think Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers are going to have their chances after this.
Okay.
They're the younger, more well-rounded team. The Broncos are the older, more experienced team. And I just hope that the Broncos can pull it off. I mean, their defense is going to have to play an amazing game to stop Carolina because their offense is not going to score many points. So if the Broncos win, it will be a low-scoring affair. It'll have to be. But if it starts to get it into a shootout, the Panthers will win.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, let's do another one soon because I think next time we can just crack open some beers and be like, you know what? I use projection mapping and I throw it over this and I put my tube in. We can talk about it.
We can get into more of the technical stuff for sure.
Yeah. But this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
I always want to get Elias on too because I told you how
he's shy.
I know, and like I did the Artist Insight series for a little bit before, and like I did about 25 episodes, but that's like we were talking about doing shit back to back. I was thinking about this the other day. I shot them all without ever actually finishing an episode first. So then when I went to edit it all, I realized like all these because I knew it was going to be a learning experience, but rather than seeing, and this is a lesson I've learned from that is, do one thing, but do it all the way through and then do it 100 times because otherwise there's some mistakes that you might be making that are really critical and you're going to continue to do those throughout it. And for me, it was shit like, I would maybe pause the video to take a break and keep the audio going or other shit. And it just became like everything would be going out of sync. Just all these like things that now it's just like, okay, now I've learned my lesson. And, we actually did our episode here. Like 5 years ago. Yeah, crazy. But that was a lot of fun back then. Maybe I'll just like dump that in there. And it's like, there's your technical part.
That was over some glasses of wine before a Christmas party.
That's
I remember.
Oh yeah, we were going to Scanline's party.
It was.
It was PSYOP maybe.
It was PSYOP. That's a good memory.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was casino night. It was good.
Yeah. Shit, a long time ago.
It was.
Yeah, I need to. It's always like towards the end of the year. I'm always like, I should call up some studios and say hi, so that way they're like, by the way, we're having a Christmas party.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like December is just hangovers the whole way through. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again. And
thank you for having me.
What's your website that we can all jump on?
It's mattconwayart.com.
So I can't go to Matt the Matte Painter?
No, I did not get that, although that's not a bad idea.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Cool.